Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday night. South Carolina coming off a disappointing loss last weekend to Missouri and the look to bounce back this weekend when they take on Vanderbilt. A lot to get into today. We will certainly go back. We'll look at the game that was against Mizzou, but we'll also look forward. We'll talk about some of the comments that were said over the last, not just, 12 hours since South Carolina spoke earlier today, like we always do on these Tuesdays. But we'll also look back at some of the comments that were said over the weekend. And then we'll look forward. Because at the end of the day, look, everything that is going on right now, there's a lot of external noise, certainly. And we want to hear from you guys. But I think it's also important to realize that with all that being said, South Carolina has an opportunity to become bowl eligible this weekend. They need to get one more win. One more win. And it's a winnable game. It's a winnable game. It is on the road. It's at Vandy, a team that you should be able to beat. We said this last week, though, right? We said this against Missouri last week. But this is a team that is a little, in a worse spot than Mizzou. You should be able to beat them. Intern Joe is off tonight, so the lines will not be working. So if you guys have a comment, whether it be on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching tonight, send us in a line, and we will be able to address it. Again, plenty to get to tonight. Plenty to get to, and I don't know where we want to necessarily begin. I kind of want to look at some of the things that were said today, and if we want to work backwards, if some of you guys want to go back over the weekend and look at certain things, whether it be the Missouri game, whatever the case may be, we will be able to do that. We'll be able to do that, but I definitely want to start off by looking at some of the comments from today. I want to be able to get this link out. Again, we're a man short tonight. Intern Joe is not with us. He'll be back on with us soon. So the lines are down as well. But the show will still go on. Just a little bit more to do tonight. That's all right. South Carolina, look. There's no – we had Savell Newton on the other day for Mixing a Water Monday. And the reason why I wanted to have Savell on is because he's said a lot. He has said a lot on social media. And as I stated in that interview, as I stated on social media, as I stated on Gamecock Central, there are things that I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says. Just like I'm sure there's some things that the people that follow me on social media, the people that know me, don't always agree with what I say. That's all right. It's okay. But there were some things that I wanted to address with him. And he laid it out in a very candid, mature way. And I think there's a lot of people that listened to it and they had a different perspective of what it was going to be that he was going to say or how he was going to say it. So that's why I did that. Again, and Brian, I see your message right now. We'll pull that up in a second. Where the offense is right now, obviously that will be a topic tonight. That was a topic on Saturday. That will be probably a topic throughout the rest of the season. And rightfully so. When you look at what South Carolina has achieved this year from an offensive standpoint, going back to last season, it's difficult to say that they are in a better place. There's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Even during this winning streak, before the loss to Missouri this past weekend, South Carolina was doing some good things offensively. We saw an improvement from the offensive line, which took obviously a big step back this past weekend. But during that winning streak, they did a lot of good. There were times where we saw improvements from Spencer Rattler, especially protecting the football. We saw some good things from the receiving core. We did see some good things. The issue is the consistency level. That's the issue. The consistency, it just hasn't been there. So when the consistency is not there, when you're looking from an improvement standpoint from year one to year two, it's difficult to look at that. It's difficult when you rank towards the bottom of a lot of statistical categories in the SEC from an offensive standpoint. That's the frustrating part. I know people want to talk about Jaheim Bell and this and that. I do have an opinion on that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the issues with the offense has just been more so just from a consistency standpoint. That's what it comes down to. Ryan, I haven't read through all this, so God bless me. This looks like a novel Beamer still seems to be beating around the bush and not addressing. I have to pick my head up. It's like a novel over here. Addressing that over 21 games, our offense has sucked unless we play someone pitiful. I mean, it's disgusting. I don't understand why we can't just be upfront about it. The offense players are clearly frustrated. Okay. So let's begin right there. Okay. Let's begin right there. I got to duck my head back down after that novel from Ryan. I think the reality is this. Again, kind of like what we're talking about. The offense just has not shown that consistent progression. And I think that's the frustrating part. We could talk about players, why they're not playing, and we'll get into that. I understand the frustration from the fan base. But as I said the other day, at this point of the year, you're not going to fire an off. I can't see South Carolina moving on from an offensive coordinator. I said that over the weekend. And Beamer said today he's not at that point. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. So if he's not going to do that, we can sit here. We could talk about hypotheticals all we want. We could talk about, why isn't Freddie Kitchens? That's not where they are right now. You might not agree with it. That's just where they're not there right now. They're not going to do that. And I'm sure some people are going to be saying, why? Why aren't they going to do that? At the end of the day, we're not in the building every day. We're not at practice every day. So it's easy to sit here on the outside and say, all right, Freddie Kitchens should be calling the plays. Or, Joe Schmo should be calling the plays. I understand the frustration. I think what needs to be done, if this is going to be the way that it's going to be heading into Vandy, and most likely for the remainder of the season, what needs to be done is it needs to be clear. What's being done offensively right now, whether you want to put a percent on it, right? How much of it goes on the offensive coordinator, how much of it goes on the quarterback, how much of it goes on the offensive line, receiver, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, the head coach needs to speak to the offensive coordinator and say, hey, we got to be able to find a way just to be able to get some consistency going. And I know that some are going to be like, why wasn't that done? I'm sure it happens every friggin' week. But this week, you can't afford to lose to Vandy. You can't afford not just to beat Vandy, but you need to be able to do it in a manner in which makes you feel better about what you're seeing from the offense. You just have to. You have to. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I mean, goodness. After this week, even though Florida, right now, is a game that South Carolina should be able to go down there and compete in. They should have an opportunity to win that game. Never easy to go down in Gainesville and win. But that's not a game that I feel like you got to do mental gymnastics to convince yourself that South Carolina should be able to win that game. As of right now. But win, lose, whatever the case may be this weekend in Vandy, goodness, you have a Tennessee team who's playing some of their best football since 98, and then you got to go to Clemson. And even though Clemson, maybe not the team that we've seen in the past, from a consistency standpoint, when I use that word, consistency standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, they still have a very good defense. They still have a very good front at that. So when you talk about the struggles from an offensive standpoint for South Carolina, having to go to Clemson, a place you haven't had to play at in quite some time because, well, the last time that you were supposed to play there, COVID happened. They're going to be riled up. They're going to be fired up. Those last two regular season games are not going to be easy for South Carolina. We know that. That goes without saying. You have to find a way to win this weekend. And again, it's not just winning, but it's being able to do something from an offensive standpoint that makes you say, okay. No one's sitting here saying what's going to happen next year. All we're talking about right now is what's going to happen this weekend against Vandy and what South Carolina needs to do for the remainder of the season. If they lay an egg in Nashville, if they lay an egg against the Commodores and the offense struggles in a way that was very similar to what we saw against Missouri this past weekend, it's hard to justify things. It's hard to justify what the heck you do. And I know there's some people that are already there. I get that. The reality is this, and this is what I would tell you to the people that want to see a change at offensive coordinator right here now. Beamer's not going to do it right now. He's already said that. So we can sit here and people can talk about their hypotheticals. He's already said he's not going to do it. So if you're already there and you're hung up on that, and again, I want to hear some of the comments because I'm sure there's some people that are upset with Beamer. That's all right. Comes with the territory when you're the head coach. We can talk about that. But that's where we're at right now. That's where South Carolina is. So if you have hypotheticals, have at it. All I'm telling you is you're kind of wasting your time right now. You're kind of wasting your time if you want to go through the mental gymnastics of trying. Bottom line is they need to be able to correct things this week. They need to correct things this week. And if there is a change at offensive coordinator, unless they lay an egg this weekend, that's not going to happen until the end of the regular season. In large part because of, one, at this stage of the season, especially when you're still 5-3, I'm not surprised to hear some of the things that we've been hearing from Beamer. And honestly, from talking to some players too, former players, they get it too. Why are you going to make an offensive change right now? It's just not going to happen. It's just not. Contract ends at the end of the in December. I'm sure there's going to be some people that don't agree with that, and I get that. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and Beamer kind of put that to rest, at least today. Again, Vandy, if the offense just comes out and plays like crap, goodness, it's going to be difficult to justify. Sellers wants to go to South Carolina. Have they still not offered him? Don't want him. That would be a better question for Wes and Chris. I'd be lying to you if I say I don't even know who the heck you're talking about. The South Florence high school player. I really have not been paying as much attention to the recruiting as I'm juggling both gigs right now, and Chris and Wes are two of the best at it. So I'd recommend going to our website, Gamecock Central, for that. Ryan, again, even when we win, our offense is still horrible. Here's what stinks about what happened the other night. Any type of good, as I put this out, because again, we're down intern Joe tonight, so we're trying to push everything out. Any type of good that has took place over the last couple of weeks, it's going to be hard for some people to look at after what we saw the other night. Again, and I've mentioned this before, the offensive line was making improvements. And I did this, if you want to call it exercise. I did this exercise the other day. I was on 107.5 The Game yesterday with Jay Phillips. And the question that I asked him, and let me know what you guys think. Weigh in. Shoot it in the comments section, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, because we don't have the phone lines tonight, unfortunately. But let's play this game, okay? Offense. Looking at the offense. From a talent standpoint. And this is what makes everything so frustrating. Offensive line. Is the offensive line better than it was a year ago? I'd say yes. I know a majority of those players are back. We understand that. But I feel like the offensive line has made progress from where they were a year ago, if you're following along now. Again, not the best exercise to do, especially after what we saw the other night from a timing standpoint. But overall, I think the offensive line is better right now than they were a year ago. Receivers. They have a deeper receiving core than they had a year ago. I think it's laughable if you even want to just dispute that. Tight end standpoint, they're deeper. They're deeper at tight end. Nick Muse, he did his job last year. He was phenomenal when it came to blocking, made some plays in the receiving game. Not even talking about what he did from a special team standpoint, just strictly speaking from an offensive standpoint. But the depth at tight end. I know Jaheim not being used maybe as much as some people would like. Again, we will get into that shortly. But Jaheim Bell, Austin Stogner has come along nicely. Nate Atkins, he's probably one of the better, if not the best, blocking tight end South Carolina has had this season. So, and we got Kenyon in there as well. Not forgetting him. But, again, strictly speaking from an offensive standpoint, not talk about special teams. He's done a great job in special teams, giving Kenyon. Then you look at running back. running back was very talented. It was a very talented room last year. You lost Kevin Harris, who a year prior led the SEC in rushing yards. He's with the Patriots now. He's on the 53-man roster. Zaquandre White, he's with the Dolphins. He's on the practice squad. Marshawn Lloyd, you talked about this three-headed monster of a running back room they had last year. Marshawn comes back. Marshawn has done a phenomenal job. It goes without saying. He's one of the best players right now on that team. So, and that's not to say that the offense, that the running back room isn't better than it was a year ago. I just think it's difficult right now to say as a whole from a depth standpoint that it's better. But the point being is across the board, and then from a quarterback standpoint, I mean, look, it was musical chairs last year. I know the stats might not be there, but if we're going to sit here and say, okay, a lot of people are going to say this. A lot of people are going to say the blame is on the offensive coordinator. Okay, if you say that, and that doesn't mean that Spencer Rattler is excused from everything. But if you're going to put the majority of the blame on the offensive coordinator, it's difficult to say, okay, all the blame's on Rattler. So pick your poison there. What I would tell you is it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of everyone. But if we're going to say the offensive coordinator, got to be consistent. Can't put all the blame on Rattler. So I say that because I would say, based on the talent that South Carolina has, that they're in a better spot quarterback-wise right now than they were a year ago. So I bring all that up. I do that example. I do that exercise because the talent from an offensive standpoint, when people say, oh, they don't have the talent, they need to go to the recruit, they got to do better recruiting. We know that already, okay? I mean, this was a team just a couple of years ago. They only had, 6 wins combined back-to-back years before Beamer got here, okay? 2 wins. 2 wins in 2020. So we know that already. But yet, they've had enough talent to be able to get 7 wins last year, to be able to get 5 wins in terms of 7 wins, first 7 games of the season, to start off 5-2. And of course, now they're 5-3. So I don't know if the talent is the issue. I don't think the talent's the issue. I'm not saying that they have the talent to go out and win the SEC East. I had them projected to finish 3rd in the SEC East this year. If you want to go back and kind of give you a perspective of what I expected from this season. But the talent is better. The talent is better. There's no two ways about it. And to get 7 wins, and look, we can go down the list and be like, all right, that's who they played last year. This is who they played this year, and this and that. No. Bottom line is go out there and just play the games, okay? Play the games. And they got off to a point where things were starting to click. They beat Kentucky on the road. Hadn't done that in 10 years. They beat A&M for the first time. That had never happened. And in both those games, the offense was not consistent throughout the entire game. They had good halves. Probably 2 of the better halves that Rattler has had since he arrived at South Carolina. Strong second half against Kentucky. Finished the game off against A&M. Gave you an opportunity to win those games. But the difference last year compared to this year, and the difference in the past, I'd say, is that special teams has took such a large step forward. And even though the defense struggled the other night to start, which not making excuses, but I mean, goodness, what do you expect when a defense is on the field as much as they were the other night to start the game? Again, that's not writing them, that's not giving them a free pass. But the offense was just struggling early. I mean, look, I loved what the offense did to start the game. And I've said this a couple times. Run, play action pass to the tight end, run again. But then Mizzou goes, what? Was it 94 yards? 96, 90-something yards down the field. They score. South Carolina comes out. Can't stay on the field long. Mizzou gets the ball back, goes down, scores again. So I'm bringing all this stuff up now, and I do want to go down and look at some of the comments that we have here, because I know there's a lot. Ryan, I appreciate the comments from earlier, teasing you about the novel. But when you fall behind early, everything's going to go out the window, right? From a game plan standpoint. That on top of the fact that Marshawn Lloyd got banged up. And this team, as we've said over the last couple of weeks, this team, based on what we've seen, based on the scheme, based on what they have tried to do, this is a run-first team. This is a run-first team. Whether you want to agree with that in terms of the fact that that's what they should be, we can have that conversation. But this is what we've seen based on the playbook. You don't agree with the playbook, I understand that. But based on the playbook, they are a run-first team. They need to run the football. And I think the example I used a couple nights ago on the post-game show with Perry Orth, it reminded me of a couple weeks back when Kansas City, for any of the pro football fans that watch the NFL, when Kansas City played the 49ers. 49ers like to run the football. And what happened? Kansas City got a big lead, and now the 49ers were forced to pass, and they got away from the run. And when you become one-dimensional, it makes things a hell of a lot easier for your defense. I think South Carolina is very similar. They're a team that is so dependent on the run right now. And the offensive line, for all the criticism that they're going to get this week, and going back to last weekend, which is rightfully so. And they'd be the first to tell you that. They have done a very nice job blocking up front for the majority of this season. After that stretch to start the year, they got things going. They have been better. I'm not saying there's All-Americans across the board, but they have been better. They had a tough game the other night. No other way to put it. They had a tough game. But they've done a very nice job, especially with run blocking during that 4-game winning streak. So I say all that because when you have an element of your game so crucial, so important that you need to be able to do, when you get away from it, it's going to change everything. It's going to change everything. And that's what we saw the other night. Never mind the fact that Marshawn got hurt. It changed everything. And I also think it leads us to trying to make sense of the Jaheim Bell situation a little bit more, which I want to dig into. And look, here's the deal. If you're just joining us right now, I see more people are hopping on in. We talked about the situation with Marcus Satterfield, and we can talk about it a little bit more if you guys want to. If you guys have comments, we'll get to your comments. Intern Joe's off tonight, so unfortunately the phone lines are down. So I'll do my best to kind of go through some of the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and sending them on in. I'll go through the side and take a look at them. But when we go back and we're talking now about where South Carolina is, especially based on the comments that we heard from Shane Beamer today, I'm not going to sit here and talk all these hypotheticals, okay? You want to do the hypotheticals? Go somewhere else. I'm not going to do it. The reality is this is where South Carolina is right now. We could talk about why they're doing certain things. We can talk about maybe why you don't agree with that. That's fine. That's fine. But where South Carolina is right now, they have an offensive coordinator who it looks like will continue to remain the OC throughout the rest of the year. And the reason why I'm bringing that up so much is because I know there's a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with it in the fan base. That's been clear. We've heard from you. We've read it on the Insider Forum. I get that. Okay? I've had my thoughts about it over the last couple of days. But now they have to find a way to move forward with this. If this is what they're going to do, they got to do a damn good job with it. And I know there's not going to be a lot of people that will agree with it. They got to do a damn good job with it this weekend. They have to. I will get to that thought about Jaheim Bell with the personnel because that is something that Beamer mentioned today. I'm glad the question was asked by Ben Portnoy from the state newspaper because I'm not at the press conferences. That would have been the question that I would have asked. And I'm glad he asked it because sometimes you're not going to get the answer that you're always looking for, but you have to ask the question. You have to ask the question. And the fact that it took about freaking 10 minutes before that question was asked, my God, I mean, come on. There's some talented reporters in that room. Someone had to have asked that question a little earlier. Please. Please. Beamer gets it. He knows it comes with the territory. It wasn't an unfair question. But you mentioned personnel. Why was Jaheim Bell only on the field for 9 snaps the other night from an offensive standpoint? After the game, and I'm paraphrasing, Beamer said Bell was healthy. It wasn't a disciplinary thing. It was a personnel. It had something to do with, it had a lot to do with personnel, with what they were trying to do. So instantly when I hear that, that makes me wonder, okay, personnel. Can you kind of explain, though, why he's not in some of those packages? And again, Beamer doesn't have to give us a straight answer. I'm not saying he didn't today, but like he doesn't have, but that question needs to be asked. That needs to be asked. Because I think there's a lot of people on the outside, especially in this fan base, based on the comments that I've heard over the last couple of days and have read. That's a question you guys wanted to have answered. So when I see that with the personnel, first thing that comes to mind is practice. And I think some people, when they hear me say practice, that doesn't mean I'm saying anyone's lazy. No. That could be the case, but that's not what I mean by that. What I mean by practice is South Carolina doing certain things in practice where they feel, and this is just all, hypotheticals. We're talking about what's going on with Bell, but is South Carolina trying to do things where they need another tight end to block more based on what they've done from an offensive standpoint this year, based on maybe some of the areas where they've struggled? Because if that's the case and they feel like someone else does a better job or has been doing a better job in practice, okay. Maybe that's why we're seeing Nate Atkins out there a little bit more. Because, again, like I said off the beginning of the show, Atkins has been one of the better blockers South Carolina has had this year at that tight end position. And as I go through this, we don't have to agree on why the fact that South Carolina is doing this. We know how talented Jaheim is. Anyone that watched that Duke's Mayo Bowl, they know that. I'm not trying to justify it because I agree. His ass needs to be out there. He's too damn talented. But one of the things that I just feel like has not been talked about or hasn't been talked about enough is just trying to figure out why. Why isn't he out there? If we're not going to get the specific reasons, or we're going to have, personnel, we're going to hear personnel. And Beamer tried to elaborate a little bit more on it today, saying that, well, certain packages, this and that. I get that. But is it a skill set standpoint? Are you looking for, and we're talking about Jaheim, but this could be anybody. We're talking about tight end, running back, receiver, whatever the case may be. Are certain players doing certain things that you are looking for in that personnel? Whatever that case may be, whether it's 12 personnel, right? It's 12 personnel. You have 2 tight ends out there. If you have Stogner and Nate Atkins out there, and it's impossible to do this at a press conference. It's impossible. Because you're going to go down the list and say, all right, in this situation, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do that. It'd be great, but we'd be there all day long. I'm not there. Even if I was at these press conferences this fall, as I double dip and I cover the Pats up here. That's not something we're going to be able to do. You're just not going to be able to get all that information out of coaches. So, again, if personnel, and that's all we can really go off of right now, and I don't think it's a disciplinary issue. I've been around Jaheim long enough, from covering him over the last couple of years to some of the charitable events that we've done through Garnet Trust. He's always been a team first guy. And as he mentioned today at the press conference, he's frustrated. Which find me a person that's a competitor that wouldn't be frustrated. So I bring all this up. And I know I'm falling behind with getting to some of these comments. And I apologize. Not doing a good job multitasking here tonight. But I bring all this up because I'm sure there were some people today that heard the comments from Bell when he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was disappointed that he went out there all week and the game plan was to get him the ball or whatever the case may be, and he's only on the field for 9 snaps. Again, trying to connect dots here because that's all we can really do. And I don't really think it's as deep as some people think it is. I don't think it has anything to do with what family members are saying on Twitter. I mean, goodness, if that's the case, going down to high school, that happens every freaking week. It's just a little bit louder right now, or it's coming across a little bit louder because things aren't going well from an offensive standpoint in the eyes of many. But that happens all the time. I mean, shoot, before even Rattler got here, remember there was questions being asked about what his dad was saying. And Beamer said, he's like, I don't have time to go through looking at what family members are tweeting and this and that. And I mean, I remember that. I didn't think it was anything bad by any means. But the point being is this stuff happens all the time on social media. That's why I don't think it's just coming across a little bit louder right now because more people are paying attention to it. But you have someone that, again, trying to connect the dots here, someone's not on the field because of personnel packages. Okay. If South Carolina had a game plan that had Bell more involved in what we saw this past weekend, but then you fall behind and you dig yourself into this hole. And the packages that you have, and maybe they felt like they needed more protection. And I think anyone that watched the game, we could tell that they probably did need some more protection the other night. That probably played a factor in it. And I'm saying all this not to make excuses for the fact that Bell wasn't out there. Because as I just said, he's too damn talented not to be out there. We're just trying to make sense of it. We're trying to make sense. We're trying to connect dots based on what we know, based on what coaches are telling us, based on what the players are saying. I could sit here and just be like, yeah, they'll keep playing them. We all get that. I mean, if you want me to do a show an hour long just doing that, go watch someone else. I'm not going to do, I mean, that's the obvious. We know that. So what I think it has something to do with the fact is that there's something going on. There's something going on from a practice standpoint where South Carolina is looking for certain things based on those packages. And what I base that off of isn't knowing directly what the situation is at South Carolina, but going back to my, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 8 years of covering the SEC, being a college football player, being around the game my whole life, that's usually the case. It usually has something to do with practice. So that's probably what it is. And again, that's not Sat's off the hook or this, that. It's just trying to make sense of it. Personnel. I don't think it has anything to do with any disciplinary. When Beamer says that, I believe him 1,000%. When Beamer says that Bell's healthy, I believe him 1,000%. And it's not just Bell. I know we're spending a lot of time talking about Bell, but this could be for any player, or at least the majority of players when you fall into this category. So I think that's what it is. Now, say all that, okay? Because you have game plan. You have a game plan going in, right? We talked about the scripted plays. You have a game plan, and then what happens, right? Going to a quote by Mike Tyson. Everyone has a game plan until you get punched in the face. South Carolina got punched in the face the other night. I don't think they were expecting Mizzou to come out at them the way they did. I don't think anyone was expecting Missouri to be able to move the ball in the manner in which they did in that first half. But because of that, and because of the struggles that South Carolina was having in the first half, especially until the final 4 minutes, 5 minutes in the first half, that second quarter. Aside from that, they weren't able to do anything offensively. And at that point, to me, the game was still in reach. Game's still in reach. Go back to who you want to be, which is run first team, play action, like we saw on that first drive when you were moving the ball. And then he got stopped. But you were doing what you wanted to do because that's what you have to do. And a lot of the things that we've talked about throughout the entirety of the season on Gamecock Central, Beamer mentioned a lot of them today. Getting Rattler outside of the pocket, designed plays where he's outside of the pocket, not where he's running for his life. A lot of that can happen when you're running the football. Talk about RPOs. I know some people get RPO happy and they want to call everything RPO. Some of it's just play action, all right? But RPO, play action, boots, rollouts, whatever you want, everything can become that much easier and simpler when you're having success running the football. But when you get away from it, when you abandon it, when you're not able to do the things that, again, going back to what Satterfield said a couple weeks ago, they want to be a team that can run the football, or at least that's the idea. I think Hale asked the question from the Big Spur. They're getting closer to that identity. That's, I think, is the exact phrase was, we have to be, I think is what Satterfield said. Then you have to find ways to get back that going. And Missouri, as we mentioned last week, they're a stingy defense. Stingy defense. I was assuming that was going to be a low-scoring game based on the fact that a lot of the defensive categories, from a statistical standpoint, they ranked in the top 40. And I think because of just how many issues they've had from an offensive standpoint, I think some people looking at that game, maybe not saying, okay, it's going to be a cakewalk, but I don't think they realized how good that defense is. So I think those are some things just to keep an eye on as to what happens moving forward now into Vandy week, is that we talk about personnel. Man, I think at this point you have to find a way to get Bell on there. And I say Bell, this could be anyone for the sake of the conversation. But if that's what we're talking about, personnel, you got to find ways to tweak things that allow him to be on the field. I think Satterfield does have a good offensive mind. You talk to people that are around the game of football, not just in that building, around the game of football, and they'll tell you that. But there's also times I feel like he tries to force things a little bit. And I think that's been one of the issues that they've run into this year, and even going back to last year, because there have been good things that they have done from an offensive standpoint. It just hasn't been consistent. And again, when you don't have one of your playmakers on the field, that goes back on the OC. He has to be able to find ways to get him on the field, unless the head coach is telling him otherwise. But I don't think that's the case in this situation. Going through some of these other comments, Dobson, do you think there will be a coaching change at the end of the year? If you're talking about offensive coordinator, Dobson, I would, at this point, I feel like you kind of have to. Unless South Carolina, with these next 4 games in the regular season, never mind the bowl game, but these next 4 games in the regular season, unless they can do something that's sustainable, and it's making you say, you know what? Man, this is the complete opposite of what we saw against Missouri. And oh, by the way, you have to do that not just this week at Vandy, but you got to do this against Florida in the Swamp. Then you got to do this against perhaps the number 1 ranked team in the country in 2 weeks. Because if Tennessee beats Georgia, they'll be the number 1 team. But if not, they'll certainly still be in the top 5 unless they get blown out. And then you got to play a Clemson team who has a very good defense. Tennessee's defense, they're nothing special. They're really not. Their offense is just, my God, their offense is a lot of fun to watch. And I think a lot of South Carolina fans see that, and they're just like, why can't that be us? I know people are going to say Jalen Hyatt. Look, at the end of the day, that's over with, man. It's over with. This coaching staff, they weren't here. They weren't here. That was Muschamp and the coaching staff that was here previously. It's over with. We know how talented Jalin Hyatt was before he even left the state of South Carolina, how talented he was at Dutch Fork. There were many Friday nights that I covered the Silver Foxes and covered Jalin Hyatt, and you could tell that kid was going to be special. You could tell that kid was going to be special. And he's doing it right now at Tennessee. But unless there's some type of wow over the next couple weeks, I can't see it. And I've used this analogy before. Sometimes in life, you could have a partner that you're dating, and they could be one of the best people in the world. And at the time, there's a lot of things that they're bringing to the table that you're looking at and saying like, wow, this is what I need. But over a period of time, you just realize, you know what? I need something else. It's just not working. We're just not clicking. Right now, I feel like that's where South Carolina is at right now with Marcus Satterfield. I think there's a lot of good things that he brings to this relationship, but I also feel like there's certain things that's holding this relationship back. And that's why at the end of the year, unless something was to drastically change over these next 4 weeks, which, as we just mentioned, okay, Vandy's Vandy, but then again, you're going to Nashville, a place where it just feels like when there's night games. I mean, shoot, I go back to Muschamp's first year. It took an Elliott Fry field goal from 40, 50 yards to win that game. Those night games in Nashville, I don't know what it is for South Carolina. It just seems like it's no cakewalk. So unless South Carolina can go out there and the offense is just clicking, and then it happens again in Florida, then it happens again against Tennessee, then it happens again at Clemson, I just can't see it. Now, obviously, I'm not Shane Beamer. I'm not the one making those decisions. But if you're asking me based on what we're seeing right now, I just can't see it. And again, using that relationship analogy, I do think there's a lot of good things that Satterfield brings to the table. I do. I really do. You can see some of the things that they're trying to do. It's just not ultimately working consistently enough to say, you know what? This makes me feel good moving forward. That's where I'm at right now. And, Will mentions offered sellers. Okay. We will have more of that update on Gamecock Central with the recruiting. Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark, they're doing a phenomenal job. I'd be lying to you. Like I said, I'm doing my best with staying up with recruiting as I'm double dipping, covering the Patriots this fall, but they are always on top of it. So I would recommend checking out Gamecock Central. They will have the latest, and I'm sure they have updates on sellers. Ryan says, why don't we run spread offense and simplify the offense? I mean, you generally have to change something. We have the talent on the field. At this point of the year, you're not just going to change up the entire offense. I know it might, and Ryan, I'm not picking on you. I'm just talking about in general because you're not the only person that has said this. Again, I've seen this a lot on the Insider Forum on Gamecock Central. It's not as simple as just saying, okay, let's be a spread team. It changes a lot of things up from a blocking assignment standpoint. Now, we have seen at times where South Carolina has gone 4 wide, 5 wide. But I also feel like based on what we've seen from this team, going back to what we talked about before, they need an element of that run game in there to help them be successful. So when you go 5 wide, unless you have Marshawn out there and occasionally he's motioning back, and now you have the running back in the backfield and 4 wide receivers, whether that be a 3-by-1 look or a 2-by-2 look, you're going to need some type of running back out there based on what we've seen with South Carolina. And I do feel like it helps them out a little bit too with what they're trying to do when they have had success. But at this point, a lot of the concepts, you got to find a way to tweak the offense in a way that the concepts remain the same, but it changes things a little bit. I mean, what I'm saying right now, it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel by any means when I say that. They have to be able to say, okay, where are we right now? Well, we're 8 weeks into the season, 9 weeks, if you count the bye, going on to week 10, 9th game of the season, if you guys are following along with me. We don't have time to just flip the playbook completely. So what do we have to do? Well, the big thing that we've been saying all season long, and Ryan, I'm going to take the word that you just said, simplify. Simplify. Perry Orth mentioned the other day that if he was there, if he was at South Carolina, what he would do right now is you get a couple plays and you work over and over and over and over and over on those plays. You trim the playbook down and you make damn sure that you're good at those plays. Damn sure. He said that was something that they did with Spurrier, and Spurrier didn't have too many formations. There was a lot of what you could do based off of the few formations that they had. As Perry has explained to me, Michael Skarnecki has explained to me on those GC Live postgame shows. But you can use that concept of simplifying by just hammering away at a few plays over and over and over and over and over. What you also can do, though, is you keep the core concept of what you're trying to achieve on certain plays. We're talking about from an offensive standpoint here. But you're able to tweak them that will maybe, okay, we don't have Jaheim on this package in here on the field. What can we do that would allow him to get on the field? And yet we still feel good about what we're trying to accomplish in this package. That's the God's honest truth. That's what I feel like they need to focus on more than anything, is finding ways to get guys like Jaheim. We keep using Jaheim, but this could be anybody. This could be anyone. Get Josh Vant, whoever the case may be. Insert player here. Okay. That's what you need to be. And I feel like with the talented coaches that they do have, and I know some people aren't going to want to hear that phrase right now, and after what we saw this past week, but they do have talented coaches. They should be able to fix something where you are able to do that. That's what I would say to that, Ryan. And I know we're seeing a lot more of the comments from Sellers, from South Florence. I will let Chris and Wes handle that, because again, I have not been really paying attention to recruiting as much as I typically do, just because of double dipping here and covering the Patriots this fall with this unique opportunity. Tommy says Beamer is not going to throw a coach under the bus. What coach us gonna want? I'm trying to figure out exactly what coach is going to want to work. I think that's the word you were looking for, Tommy. What coach is going to want to work for a head coach that publicly embarrasses your coaches? He's thinking about the future. Tommy, everything you said right there is spot on. It's spot on. He's not. And I think the part that is frustrating from the fan base is it goes back to last year. I think that's the part that's making right now difficult for the majority of this fan base to swallow this pill, because I think a lot of people saw what happened last year and they were like, well, this offense just isn't going to work. I was saying, hey, give it time. That's what Perry Orth mentioned. That's what Michael Skarnecki has said. And I think a lot of people, from talking to different coaches, that's what they would have done. Exactly how Beamer went about it. Because when you bring a new offensive coordinator in and you're trying to teach different concepts, especially going from a man blocking to zone blocking, something that this offensive line just hadn't been asked to do that much in years prior, even though they've been playing together. We saw how much of a struggle it was last season. So again, looking back to last season and where South Carolina is now, and I know it's not an ideal time to do this based off of what we saw the other night, but offensive line, they've made progress this year. They have made progress. Okay? There's been progress from the wide receiving core. You think back to 2 years ago, especially, outside of Shi Smith, no one could freaking get open. No one could get open. So I bring these things up because we have seen improvements. The frustrating part of it all, though, is it just hasn't been good enough. It hasn't been consistent enough. And when you're not having the consistency, when you're not having the type of success that you need, and it starts going the complete opposite way, with maybe, I don't know, the way that you saw the other night, I guess that's the best way to put it, because it's the most recent, it's going to be difficult for people to say, okay, yeah, no, because there's a lot of people out there that just weren't happy last year, and I get that. Brian says, I actually agree with you. I'm very frustrated, but Satterfield is not the answer. If this team lays an egg the last 4 games, it could get ugly quickly. Brian, I think it could get ugly quickly this weekend. And I pray to God that we don't have to find out about that. I pray to God that South Carolina is able to go up there, handle their business, and not just handle their business in terms of getting a win, but that the offense is able to come out there and they're able to bounce back. I think the thing about it is they have the talent. That's what we talked about before. They have the talent. We did the exercise a little bit earlier if you're just joining us. We might go a little bit longer tonight because screw it, why not? But they have the talent. Go back to last season. Go down the list from units. Offensive line this year to offensive line last year. You can't tell me that the offensive line is not better this year than they were last year. That's not to say that this is the greatest offensive line ever, but there's been progress made. Again, maybe not the ideal time to do this exercise after what we saw the other night, but they have had progress. They have made progress. They're running the ball much better as well, and we've seen that over the 4-game winning streak. And they're protecting the quarterback. Just didn't happen on the other night, but they have made progress. And it's not just, okay, well, Charlotte, South Carolina State. I get that. They also did it against Kentucky, who is one of the best defenses in the country, okay? They also did that against Texas A&M, who, yes, you know what? They're going through some stuff right now, but you know what? You went through some stuff last year, okay? And you still had 7 wins. So I don't want to use that excuse. Well, you know, they're going through some still an SEC team. They're still an SEC team. Seeing some more from T. Sellers has been offered. So I'll stay away from some of the recruiting stuff. There's some players that I have more knowledge about right now. But as far as, you know, Sellers, again, I'll direct you guys to Gamecock Central. Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, they do an outstanding job for us when it comes to football recruiting. Brian, again, do you think Doty deserves at least a series or 2 this weekend? Sorry, but Rattler is way overrated. He holds the ball too long. I don't think he's good at reading defenses. So, again, I brought this up earlier, and Brian, I'll pick on you just a little bit. And I know this was from like 40 minutes ago, so I don't even know if you're still with us, if you logged off or not. But let's go back to one of the comments that you just made 3 minutes prior to sending that one in. Talking about you're very frustrated. Satterfield's not the answer. Okay, Satterfield's not the answer. Rattler's overrated. Satterfield's not the answer. Rattler's overrated. I'm not saying that the two have to be connected, that they're inclusive. They're exclusive. But what I'm trying to get at is, if you're pointing at the offensive coordinator, do you give the quarterback more the benefit of the doubt? You know what I'm trying to get at? I'm not saying that Rattler doesn't deserve some of the criticism. But if you're going to say that you're very frustrated with Satterfield and that he's not the answer, how can you turn around and then say Rattler's overrated? Because if you're saying that about Satterfield, do you feel like whoever the quarterback is, do you feel like the quarterback is being put in the best position to succeed? That's where I'm getting at with that. And I think that's the part that needs to be evaluated during the offseason as well. But, you know, I just want to bring that up. But to answer your full question, though, do you think Doty deserves a series or 2 this weekend? I'm still riding with Rattler. Now, last weekend, when South Carolina was struggling a little bit to get any momentum, especially with the fact that they were playing at home, I wouldn't have mind seeing Doty go out there for a couple series to give that stadium a spark. Because, I mean, shoot, we saw it with Clemson. I know Gamecock fans hate when I use comparisons to Clemson. We saw it with Clemson. K didn't do anything special against Syracuse. But when he came in for DJ Uiagalelei, who had been performing pretty damn well the last couple of weeks prior to that, when he came in there, I think he only was asked to throw the ball 4 times. He had a beautiful throw and a 2-point conversion. He gave that fan base a spark, and it gave the team a spark. So, no, I think right now you ride with Rattler because, again, I'm not saying Rattler is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But if there's issues with the offense, and again, to go back with the majority of the fan base, it feels like. I know not everyone probably would say that they want me to put their, put words in their mouth, but it feels like the majority of the fan base feels like the issues are the offensive coordinator. Is that fair now to put the blame on the quarterback? The full blame. I mean, again, we could talk about pie charts, how much of it. That's not saying Rattler doesn't deserve any blame, whoever the quarterback is. But are they being put in the best position to succeed? When you don't have a guy like Jaheim Bell out on the field, is that helping your quarterback? Something to think about. I thought this was a 6 or 7 win regular season team. I think the OC change will occur after the season. Again, if they keep going down this way that they're going, I think it's inevitable. I think it's difficult to justify how you can bring him back. And again, I've said this before. I think there's been a lot of things that Satterfield has done that has been good. I think there's been a lot of things that you could see why he's doing it. But like that relationship analogy, is it working? Is it the best fit? Are you and your partner, in this case, the OC and the team, are they the best fit for each other? And that's a question that I don't feel like you answer right now. I think it's the elephant in the room. It's kind of like when you're going through rough patches in a relationship. Maybe some people just rip the Band-Aid off altogether. Okay. But other people, they're going to try to sit through it, figure it out, give it some time. And then when that moment comes, they're going to make a decision. And I feel like that's where South Carolina is right now. Cocky Talk. We were so worried about being ranked. Cocky Talk, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's something else that is being kind of overlooked. There's obviously a lot of things we could talk about with the offense. We could talk about the defensive slow start as well. But just from a team standpoint, this was the first time that a majority of the players on this team had ever been ranked at South Carolina. At South Carolina. I'm not talking about Rattler, college football playoffs, Oklahoma, top 10 right now. No. Stogner as well. We're talking about at South Carolina. For the majority of this team, last week was the first time they had ever been ranked. Ever. And we could sit here and say, again, talk about the offense. It's a team sport. And I just don't know what the mentality was from that team last week. Beamer mentioned after the game that he didn't feel like that was the case. But I think it's difficult to say until you're actually out there and you can see the guys respond. It's difficult. Because I think Beamer does a good job with getting these guys prepared. But when you're going through first, until you're actually in that moment, until you're actually out there on the field and the lights are on, it's difficult to know what the heck you're going to get. And we saw what happened last week. So as much as it stinks, it's something that now, okay, you had that experience, you had that taste, and you hope now that it makes them get hungrier to want to get back to that point and learn from it. So that when they get ranked again down the road, which obviously is the hope, that they're not going to turtle the way that we saw. This is a long-term rebuild. Give him time. And I think this is the disappointing part of it in a sense, because I've had this conversation with a couple people. The issue sometimes is we talk about timelines, right? Is Beamer ahead of where some people had him being at what? This is 8 games in. So 20 games in, 21 games in. And I know the stats. I know we could talk about Muschamp through 21 games and Spurrier 21 games. I think they pretty much all have the same records, if not the same. I think they're all 12-9, or if not around that park. I think Spurrier started off 12-10 through 22 games. But I bring that up because I don't get too caught up with that. I really don't, because it's kind of like any statistic where you could use that to just make a point about anything in favor of your argument that you're trying to make. Like I could say that, and then someone could use the exact same numbers and say it a different way. So I'm not too caught up on that. What I am looking at, though, is the fact of what they did last season And because of what they did last season, and because of what they did in the offseason, from a recruiting standpoint, whether that be through the transfer portal or some of the guys like Nick Eamon-Worry, I don't think a lot of people expected him to have the type of impact he's had right away. Maybe some of the coaches did. Maybe some of his high school coaches did. Maybe Nick did. But I don't think a lot of us outside of that expected him to have the type of impact, which right now, I mean, he's on pace right now to be an All-American for the freshman All-American team. But I say all that because I do think because of what happened last year, because of all the energy, that bar has risen so high that it makes things challenging to get to that point without having any type of hiccup. And I think the hiccup we're seeing this year has been offensive consistency. If this team wasn't bowl eligible last year, again, I don't want to go through a hypothetical rabbit hole here, but they lose to Vandy. They're not bowl eligible last year. Do they get Rattler? I don't know. But the mood in the offseason would have been completely different. So that happens. Now you go into this season. Is the goal just to become bowl eligible? So, but the point being is that's not where South Carolina was going into this season because they had they raised that bar up in year one, which is a good thing. But because of that, the expectations are higher. So where they are right now, again, wins and losses. At the end of the day, that's what you're going to be judged on. But the whole 12-9, and this is what Muschamp was, and this is what Spurrier was. I mean, you can see differences with this team. I know that South Carolina went to the Outback Bowl in Muschamp's second year. I get that. But there's just differences with this team. The issue has just been offensive consistency. And you hope if that is the issue, and if that is something that is addressed at the end of the season, if you feel like that is something that needs to change, you hope that you're able to correct it, and it's going to be able to get you to that next step. Again, we're going to have to wait and see how that all comes down. Carlton, how can Jaheim not be in the personnel grouping when he plays three positions? Carlton, that goes back to what we were talking about before. And I know I kind of went on a little rampage at the beginning, a little rant, but it goes back to what we were talking about before. He's talented enough to be on the field. The question now becomes, why isn't he on the field in some of those personnel packages? Is it because he's not blocking the way that they need the tight end on certain packages to block? And maybe that's why we're seeing Nate Atkins, who, as I mentioned before, is probably one of the better blocking tight ends South Carolina has. Are there situations where they feel like from a practice standpoint, there's just other guys that are performing at a more consistent level, or they're doing certain things that they're looking for when they have those packages? I think that's what it is more than anything, because I feel like, and as you brought up, he's capable of playing pretty much any freaking position. I mean, the guy is talented as hell. There's a reason why, going back to the spring, Satterfield said, okay, he's not a tight end. We joke around that his position is actually a wide back. What the heck does that mean? I think we know what that means, which is he's basically someone that can be all over the field. And we saw that at the beginning of the season. We saw him in the backfield getting some handoffs. And that's not saying that he's not capable of doing that, but I think we also noticed that, okay, once they changed that up, what happened? Marshawn started to get more touches, and Marshawn really was able to get going in the backfield. But again, I think you got to address that this week. I think that's where it starts this week, is that you have to ask yourself what needs to be done in order to get Bell on the field. And if it's a personnel problem, and I say problem for a lack of a better word, but if it's a personnel problem and you feel like you need certain guys out there to do certain things, you got to ask yourself, okay, we got to have Bell on the field. What do we do now to be able to tweak that, to make up for that? You're getting paid a lot of money to make those decisions, whether you're the offensive coordinator, whether you're the head coach, or it could be the defensive coordinator, special teams, whatever the case may be. Coaches get paid a lot of money. Those are the things that they deal with every day. Never mind week, every day. So that is something that this week you should focus on. T. Thompson, you said it earlier, Mike. Atkins is our best blocking tight end. We were running the ball more. Yeah. And I know some of these comments were from about 40 minutes ago. I apologize. Short staff tonight. So I'm, doing my best to be able to get to some of these comments from earlier. But I think that has a lot to do with it. And again, that's not saying that I agree with it. But based off of what we've been told, I think there's a lot of people out there that still, they're like, that's not good enough for me. I want to know why. I want a reason that makes me understand a little bit more. And you know what? I totally get it. Sometimes we'll find out what those reasons are. Sometimes we'll know the specifics, but no coach, no player, no team. And I have to experience it with the Patriots. So imagine what I have to experience every week when you're trying to get some of these things out. They don't owe anyone anything. I know boosters aren't necessarily going to agree with that, but they don't owe anyone anything in terms of telling them why. So I say all that because I do feel like a lot of it just has to do with what they're trying to accomplish from a game plan standpoint by using different packages and personnel, and they feel like that puts them in the best position to succeed in that package. But when you have a guy as talented as Jaheim Bell, and again, we keep using the word Bell, but it could be Josh, it could be anyone. You got to find ways to get them out there on the field. And if you feel like they are talented enough, then you find ways to be able to get them incorporated with what you're trying to do from an offensive standpoint, and you kind of gel it to make it work. And that's what you have to do this week. I feel like that's where they're at right now. J-Dub, why would it not be a good idea to see Freddie Kitchens can do something the next 4 weeks leading into a bowl game? Well, I'll say this. If that were to happen, you're going to have to keep the same concepts. You're not going to be able to change the playbook completely in less than a week. You're just not. You're not going to be able to do that. This happens sometimes when a team goes into a bye week and they have a little bit extra time, but you're not going to be able to change everything. So if that's what you're saying, and J-Dub, I'm not saying that's exactly what you're saying, but if that's what you're saying, that's not going to happen. Now, if you're saying, why can't Freddie Kitchens be the one that calls the play or calls the plays and tries to get the flow of the game? Because we've heard so much of that, or at least people on the outside, they've expressed their displeasure about how they feel that there's no flow. And that's the reason why the consistency is not there. If that were to happen, I don't know if Beamer would come out directly and say that. Because I also feel like that's an indictment on him based on what he's done from a hiring standpoint as a coach. So I think what he's going to try to do is he's going to try to ride the ship with the guy that he hired. They're going to continue to find ways to make this work for the end of the year because, look, again, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but even if South Carolina wins these next 2 games, they got Tennessee and Clemson. I can't see them beating them. I'm sorry. I can't see them beating them. And even though Tennessee's defense hasn't been anything special, still a very good offense. And if they're putting up a lot of points, what could happen? Well, you become one-dimensional again. In South Carolina's pass game, it hasn't been consistent enough, in my opinion, to be something where you can just become a one-trick pony. But you might have to continue to pass. And this is a team, as we heard Satterfield say a couple weeks ago, that they want to be able to run the football efficiently. They have to, I think, is exactly the way he put it. So you lose those 2 games, I mean, goodness. Even if you win these 2, they need to find ways to get things going. Again, if they don't beat Vandy this weekend, if they come out and look on the same level as they did from an offensive standpoint against Missouri, I don't know how you can justify it for the rest of the year. I don't. Hopefully we don't have to find out about that. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is going to be what we see right now, minus some internal tweaks. Some tweaks we might not even know. He mentioned Freddie K. I'm not saying that Freddie's not calling the plays. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. But if something like that were to happen, I don't know if we're going to find out publicly. There could be leaks that come out of it, but I don't think South Carolina is going to be saying that publicly. I just don't. I don't think Beamer is going to do that. Brian, it's silly to expect a coaching change during the season. My question is, when Rattler goes back to pass, do you expect a completion? And Brian, again, a lot of these comments were from earlier. That was at 7:33, so I apologize for just getting back to you now. But as a token of my appreciation for everyone that has sent comments in tonight, we will keep the show rolling a little bit longer so we can get to some of those comments. But if you're just hopping on with us now, GC Live Talking Tuesday night's a little bit different tonight. Intern Joe is not with us this evening. He's doing all right. He'll be back on with us soon. So no phone lines tonight. I'm going to have to mix in more than just the water tonight after talking for, goodness, hour plus straight, whatever the case may be. But we'll go a little bit longer. But yeah, Brian, again, like we talked about before, I can't see an offensive coordinator change happen in the middle of the season either. Perry Orth mentioned it. Michael Skarnecki has talked about it with us on GC Live for the post-game shows. The only way I can see that happening is if this week in South Carolina loses and it gets to a point where the offense is just, they take another step back. That's the only way. Other than that, people saying fire, I'm never going to be the fire this person. I mean, that's not my job. Okay. I ask the questions. Unfortunately, I'm not down there right now for the press conferences. Thank God Ben Portnoy asked the question today from the state newspaper about the personnel and talking about Jaheim Bell. And I'm glad he brought that question up. I was watching that press conference. I'm like, is someone going to ask that? Is someone going to, please? Like freaking 10 minutes, can someone ask the freaking question? Oh, it's so frustrating because we have talented reporters. Just someone ask the question. Goodness. J-Dub again. If Marcus signed a 2-year deal and we didn't extend his contract, I don't believe he would even choose to come back. I believe he follows Matt Rule somewhere. Now, look, that was something that I had talked about before, not really publicly, that I was going to be interested to see where Matt Rule was going to end up. I didn't think he was going to be able to finish the year out with the Panthers. I just didn't. I had a chance to be able to see the Panthers when they came up here to New England for training camp, and they did the joint practices, and I wasn't impressed by either Mayfield. I know Sam Darnold got hurt, but I wasn't impressed with the quarterbacks. I feel like there are some good things that they're doing from a defensive standpoint. Having J.C. Horn back being one of them. Shout out to J.C. Horn. But yeah, I'm interested to see if that plays a role at all. I think the disappointing thing is you would like to see things work because there are some things that he's doing that recruits do like. I've talked to some recruits. They do like some of the things that he's doing. Talked to a recruit just the other night, and they're not changing their opinion on him. They're not changing their opinion on South Carolina. Does that mean that individual speaks for every recruit? Because I know that's something that people are concerned about. Certainly not. But this is just from talking to a recruit the other night. So I'll share that. J-Dub. As T says, J-Jub, that solves our problem then. We're talking about the contract extension, I'm sure, with Marcus Satterfield. J-Dub, again, I agree. I don't think Beamer will show much interest, and there's no way he isn't hearing the noise from the fan base. Beamer knows what's going on, and that's why I think with the way he's answering some of these questions, does anyone enjoy him? No. No one likes being put underneath the spotlight and questioned about your integrity, your what's most important, right? Your loyalty to this person or is your loyalty to winning games. I don't want to speak for Beamer, but I mean, come on. This guy wants to win games. He knows how it goes. His father was coaching for years. And I know people can say, well, that was some of Frank Beamer's, blemishes for his career, that sometimes he didn't know when to cut bait. You don't think these are conversations he's had with his father over the years? You don't think this is conversations that Shane has had with other coaches who have done this for a long period of time? I'm sure this is something he's had conversations with. And it's one of those things, too, that I'm sure Marcus understands. Every coach on that staff understands that if you're not performing consistently to a level that they feel like will bring them to that next step, then yeah, everything will be discussed at a later time, as it is every year at the end of the season. So I think, look, there's going to be people that are upset with Beamer saying he's got no spine and this and that. I mean, will you stop it? Really? I mean, come on. If a decision is going to be made, it's not going to be done until the end of the year. Unless, and this is just my opinion, I don't know this for certain, unless they lay an egg against Vandy. Unless they lay an egg against Vandy, the offense just looks absolutely like hot garbage. I can't see that happening. T again, he's hearing noise from the team as well. Yeah, I mean, you could tell the players are frustrated. And they're doing the best they can to keep things moving forward. But I think it's one of those, look, the challenging part now with coaching, and I've had these conversations with not just football coaches, but basketball coaches over there, baseball coaches. This thing right here makes things very difficult for coaches, makes things very difficult, because as much as you can tell your players, all right, this is what you got to do, ignore this and that, the same way Johnny texts his girlfriend is the same way he's getting information. And even though you've heard from Perry Orth on our shows over the years, especially this season, talk about how one of the things that he would tell players, get off social media during the season, get off Twitter during the season. It's not that easy. Never mind the fact that we're in this new era of NIL where a player's brand can earn the money. And I'm not saying what should be prioritized, like that should be number one, that should be two, that should be two, whatever the case may be. But it's difficult to say that now. It is. It's just an added distraction. And I know there's going to be some people that will say, well, what's the most important thing for them? Is it their brand or is it the team? I mean, that's easy for us to say. It's easy for us to say. You go out there, represent your university, go win, this and that. If you have an opportunity to go make some money while you're playing, I mean, come on. Come on. If you're saying that that wouldn't be something that you would pay attention to, if you have an opportunity to go out, no one's saying to do anything crazy, but someone buys your shirt, you retweet it, or whatever the case may be, come on. We'd all do that. Shoot, it's not the same. I do that with Bojangles, for crying out loud. I have my sponsorship. I have to do a couple tweets each month. I get paid by them for doing that. And I'm sure there's some people that get frustrated seeing my Bojangles tweet sometimes. Just comes with it, though. If you're able to make some extra money from just doing what you're doing, how can you fault a kid for that? So I think that's the challenging part now about this. An RIP takeoff, an Atlanta icon, Migos. Sad news today. Hunter, wish we could play like Tennessee. Yeah, it would be fun to watch that type of offensive style, huh? And I think, too, look, the game itself is evolving, and we've seen it change. I think it was a couple weeks ago, Nick Saban mentioned it on his coach's show, that when they were playing Tennessee, I think Tennessee was a goal line situation. They came out in an I formation. Saban talked about this on his coach's show a couple of days later that his players didn't know what the heck to do because they hadn't seen an I formation. Now, that can go back to preparation and coaching. I'm sure Saban would tell you that. But it also just shows you just how much this game has changed. That there are players out there that don't see I formation that much anymore. I mean, how crazy is that when you think about it? But I bring that up because you have teams right now spreading the football out so much. And I think with South Carolina, I think a lot of people expected that when Rattler got here. They were hoping, in some sense, to see the offense be able to replicate what Oklahoma did. Well, I don't want to say it's been the complete opposite of that, but it's been run the ball first. That's just who South Carolina is right now. That's not to say that it can't be successful. It's just not there right now consistently enough. Allen says Spurrier was innovative and he knew how to keep defenses off balance. SB was there. Shane Beamer should be able to do the same depending on special teams, then 3 and out. I think the big issue right now is just the consistency with offense. I mean, there's no other way to put this. I'm going to sound like a broken record tonight, but that's what it is. That's what it is. And that's not saying the defense doesn't have its issues. I think the thing with the defense, though, that makes me feel a little bit better about them now in comparison to the beginning of the season is that they're healthier now. They're healthier. Yes, I understand that they came out slow against Missouri the other night. Yes, I understand the Tigers marched down the field 96, 94, 90-something yards on their first drive. But what doesn't help is when your offense is going out there, 3 and outs, not moving the football. Time possession in the first half, I believe it was like 20-10, 19-11 in terms of minutes. You're not helping out your offense. Excuse me, your defense. It wasn't until I think there was like 5 minutes left and you maintained the ball for 4 minutes on that touchdown drive. But before that, I mean, goodness, your offense was struggling to move the football to the point where your defense didn't have enough time to come off the field and sit on the sideline, grab water, whatever the case may be, because they had to go right back out there. It's not just impacting the offense. It's impacting other phases of the game because your defense is not able to get a breather to the point where they have to go right back out, 3 and out, right back out there. You can see how gassed they are. And that happened the other night against Missouri. J-Dub again, Satterfield has called one good game, and I believe you give too much credit for the game he called, and it's because it was a bowl game, so he had months to sit on that. We expected this year. Like I've said before, I like some of the things he's done this season. I like what we saw against Kentucky in the second half. I liked what we saw against Texas A&M in the second half. I liked what we saw that opening drive against Missouri. He's done some good things. The issue is it's just not consistent enough. And I don't think some of the things that he's doing are sustainable to be successful here. And what I mean by that is we talk about some of the personnel packages. I just feel like they're leaving some things on the table. I feel like not having a guy like Bell on the field, I feel like they're leaving that on the table. And I do agree with what Beamer said today. You go down the list, they have so much talent right now on paper. And I say on paper because we have to see some of it on the field to really be able to say, man. But I think whether you want to say on paper or just say talent in general, they have talent. It's just that it's not being utilized to a level that can take this team to that next step. And yes, going back to what Beamer mentioned today, if you have, 2 wide receivers out there, 3, whatever the case may be, you might not be able to put Bell out there with that personnel package. You want to have Marshawn on the field. Okay. But it goes back and, to I think it was Allen that mentioned it before with Spurrier. If you have Torrey Gurley and Alshon out there, you have to find ways to get both those guys on the field. You put the best players out there on the field. I know it's easy for me to say that, but you put the best guys out there on the field. I don't think there's any excuse for Okay, they play the same position. Is it going to put you in the best position to succeed? And I feel like based off of what we've seen from some of these guys, it's hard not to say yes. But then again, goes back to personnel. Do they feel like they need an extra tight end in there to block? Whether that be a Nate Atkins, whether that be a two tight end set. And if you have a two tight end set and you have Marshawn out of the field, you're only going to have two wide receivers out there. So these are some of the things that Beamer was mentioning today, which I agree with, but this is the stuff we're talking about now. This week, okay, that didn't work last week. Didn't work. What can you do now? Same concepts, because you don't have enough time to be able to flip the playbook completely, to be able to get some of those guys out on the field who we've heard from Satterfield say, hey, if I could get the ball to Bell, I think he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but 1,000 times I would. Okay, now's your opportunity. Now is the time. Not saying it wasn't earlier, but now's the time to make those things happen. Going through a little bit more, J-Dub, again, he didn't call a good game over that last year, and nothing this year has proved anything over the halfway point. No excuses. Again, kind of just hit on it. I think there's been good halves of football, just not full games. You know, even with SC State, even with Charlotte, it was more so those second halves. First quarter, that's what I'm talking about. Full 60 minutes. We haven't seen it. Cameron, it's amazing the difference a healthy Lloyd makes. As soon as we lost him, it was like we forgot who we were. Yeah. And again, talked about this before with Bell. You're down early in the game. How much does that change the plan of attack with what they wanted to do from an offensive standpoint, right? How much does it change the game when Lloyd's out? Changes it a lot. And I think we saw that. We saw it to a point where USC really, really struggled to do anything on the ground. Now, Beamer brought this up today, and again, I agree with him to an extent, which is you're going up against a stingy, and that's the word I kept using last week, and I'll keep using it today anytime I talk about Missouri, a stingy defense. Stingy defense. But you shouldn't run the football for 32 yards. I'm sorry. 23 carries, 32 yards. Take Marshawn out of it. Christian Beal-Smith, 3 carries, 3 yards. Juju McDowell, 5 carries, 1 yard. His long was 6. So I bring these things up. Because you just can't have them. You just can't have them. Brian, again, you just reporting on the Pats? What's the feeling in Boston about Udoka going to Brooklyn? All right, we'll throw a little Boston talk in there. I think from what it looks like, they just want to get rid of him. They suspended him, the Celtics, that is, and they're not worried about getting anything in return. They're like, hey, you want to go interview with them? Good. When he got suspended by the Celtics, I couldn't see him coming back. I just don't know how you can suspend someone for team violations and bring them back. So I've been covering the Patriots. I've been covering the Celtics, the Bruins, Red Sox. Well, they were a bunch of bums this year. So no Red Sox coverage since I've been up here. Ryan says, yes, referring to Perry. This is Perry Orth saying under Spurrier, they had 25 formations, but only 10 plays, and they could run all the plays in different formations. Heck, I don't know. Yeah. Yep. And that's what we hit on earlier. And I think this week, and I know some people are going to be like, okay, why should it have took the other night to get to this point? When I say they need to simplify it and get down, I'm sure they've been trying to. It just hasn't been enough. It hasn't been good enough. This week, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. You have to come out clicking on all cylinders from an offensive standpoint. You have to. South Carolina could win this game, but the offense has to look better. They have to. This can't be a repeat of what we saw the other night. Pack-a-lack. Need to run 2 tight end RPO offense. I'll bet my house it works. We've seen the 2 tight end sets out there. A lot of 12 personnel, Pack-a-lack. And I think that's why we're probably seeing more Nate Atkins, or at least that's why we saw it this last game. Again, I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm not saying I agree, but based off of what we know from what Beamer has said, what Satterfield has said, which, by the way, Satterfield is scheduled to speak tomorrow with the media. Based off of what we know, South Carolina has had those 2 tight ends out there a little bit more than what we had with Bell the other night. So RPO, look, again, I know some people get RPO happy. Some of it's just play action. RPO, you're reading the outside linebacker, okay? You're reading the outside linebacker. I think some people, they just see play action and they get so caught up, and I'm not saying that's the case with you, Pack-a-lack, but I'm just bringing that up. I think some people get, because it's the cool thing to say now, RPO. Some of it's still just play action. Some of it's still, reading the DN. And it's not it's not reading the outside linebacker, seeing if he's coming up or dropping into coverage. But again, you can do some of that with a guy like Bell. What needs to be done, though, and I'm just, again, if this is the case, if you feel like he needs to do a better job blocking, which I don't know if that's the problem. I don't know. I don't think any of us know on the outside as to why he's not in some of these personnel groupings. But if that's the case, he needs to do a better job blocking. And if he does that, then we'll see him out there on some of these play actions. Because, we've talked about this before to Carrion Joyner, even before the bowl game, which because of it, it helped them in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. But even the one play where he was out there against Georgia this season, anytime DK came out onto the field at quarterback, it seemed like everyone knew that he was just going to run the football. Every single freaking time. And that's probably, again, why he had as much success as he did in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, because he's talented enough. And I don't think anyone at UNC expected him to come out there and start slinging the ball like he did. But I bring that up because the same can be true about any player. So when we talk about Jaheim Bell, if Jaheim's going out there and they feel like Jaheim's only out there, and I'm just thinking as a defensive coach, anytime he's out there, they're going to throw him the football. Well, if that's the case, that kind of takes that element of surprise with the play action out of it. So those are the things that we need to see if, again, these are all hypotheticals, if that is one of the reasons why he's not in some of this personnel packages that we've seen out there. It's hard for me not to think that there's something going on from a practice standpoint, that they just feel like these packages that they're running need to have a guy that can block a little bit better. It's the only thing I can think of. It really is. Because, again, healthy. It's not for disciplinary reasons. We've seen the good attitude from Bell today. We heard Beamer talk about it today as well, saying that he had a 30-minute conversation with Bell. You don't have 30-minute conversations apologizing to players if they're not getting out on the field as much as they should. If something is up from a character standpoint problem or just, no, that's not the issue. I just feel like they're trying to do things from a personnel standpoint, and they kind of got away from what they were doing. And because of it, Bell wasn't as used as much as I think a lot of us would have liked to have seen him use this past weekend. Ashley, I feel really bad for Spencer. I think we all knew that he was coming here for 1 year to improve his draft stock and then move on. Now I just want to spit nails because of what Sat has done to him. I don't know this for certain, but I'm not going to be shocked to see Rattler come back next season. I'm not at all. if his goal is to play in the NFL, and after everything that was being said about him publicly last season, and I say publicly, and I think we all understand, people questioning about his character and was he a good teammate? Is he a good player still? This and that. I don't know how much this season has helped out his draft stock. I really don't. It's hard to look at it. And that's not to say that he's not talented, because I think he's very talented. I think he has a phenomenal arm. I really do. But because the issue as a whole with the offense has took place, it's definitely not helped him out. And that's not to say that the blame or some of it doesn't fall on him, because again, and Beamer mentioned this today, things are going well, quarterback's going to get a lot of credit. When things aren't going well, quarterback's not going to get a lot of credit, as well as the head coach and offensive coordinator. So I think it's going to be interesting to pay attention to. And I can tell you too, is if Rattler does come back, it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts recruiting at that position. And that's not to say South Carolina is going to back off on guys, but if Rattler leaves, maybe that changes things up for some guys. Maybe some other quarterbacks decide to come here a little bit earlier. But if not, maybe they decide to sit back and wait. So that is something to keep an eye on as well. Colts Outdoors. They have the talent, and they can't even get a first down. This offensive scheme has been a complete failure this season. Goes back to something my high school coach once said. They have the tools, they just don't have the toolbox. They have the tools, they just don't have the toolbox. Packalack, once again, says, check the stat. We have went backwards ever since our first game. Sat has got to go. I can check the stats, but again, outside of the other night and the slow start to the beginning of the season, which, oh, by the way, all offseason I said was going to happen, they have been doing some pretty good things offensively. Not to the point where it's just like, whoa, but they were making progress. But nothing that said, oh my goodness. The run game was better. The blocking up front was better. They're protecting Rattler a bit better. But still, way too much inconsistency this go around in year 2 with this offensive coordinator. That's the issue. You don't even have to look at the other night. I would have told you that before the other night against Missouri. But now that we saw that, not good. T. Thompson, O-line looked like it took a step or two back. Yeah. Again, I felt like the offensive line was doing a lot of good things over the last couple weeks. And I will say this. Did the offensive line have a bad night the other night? Absolutely. Anyone that watched the game could tell you that. But, and it's hard to know for certain without knowing the exact play call. When they're on the outside, you don't have the play sheet in front of you. But I'm sure there were times, and I think of one play in particular, I don't know if it was a defensive back or an outside linebacker. He came off free off the corner, where Rattler probably misidentified the front. So some of those plays, it's easy to look at the offensive line and blame, but I'm sure some of it was on Rattler too at times. I'm sure some of it was on the tight ends. I'm sure some of it was on the running backs where they missed blocking assignments. So again, that's not saying that the offensive line had no problems the other night. They did. They had plenty. It was evident. But there were also missed blocking assignments, I'm sure, with other players out there, as well as some pre-snap misreads by Rattler. Ashley, Rattler is not overrated. His QB coach, OC, is not calling plays that allow him to. And that's, again, it goes back to what I was mentioning before. If people want to keep saying it's the play calling, it's the scheme, it's the OC, it's not saying that the quarterback doesn't deserve any of the blame, just like if things were going well, right? It's not just all the OC. It's not just all the quarterback. It's a little bit of both. But if you're going to blame the OC to a point where it's like, the scheme's awful, he's got to go. Can you put all that on the quarterback? Really? I don't think you can. At least I can't. That's not to say that Rattler can't be better. Certainly can. But I do feel like that's something that people need to look at. It's just like if Doty was out there and the same thing was happening, I'm not saying that automatically would, but if that were, and we're just going to say, oh, that's all, I think it's a product of what they're in, product of the system more than anything. M. Cold again, I think the offensive scheme is the problem. It shouldn't be this difficult to get the ball in our playmakers' hands. Most of the drives Saturday night went backwards. Allen again. Spurrier changed QBs in the game. That he did. Berryworth mentioned it after the game on Saturday night. He said that if that was Spurrier last week, Spurrier probably would have made a quarterback change towards the end of the game to add that spark. Like we were talking about how Clemson did against Syracuse. BMAC laps. I think Rattler is doing what he is told to do, stay in the pocket and try to make the play or throw it away. They need to give him the freedom to scramble more. They've mentioned it at times. I mean, I've mentioned it a lot because of the extension of the run game and what it can do, play action pass, RPOs, bootlegs, rollouts, whatever you want to call it. But Beamer mentioned it today that they're trying to get him outside the pocket more. They are. I think teams are just doing, I think Missouri did a pretty decent job. I mean, obviously there were sometimes they flushed him out, but those design plays where they have him going outside the pocket, they're not, teams are doing, at least Missouri did a good job of containing him because that's where he feels more comfortable, or at least that's what it looks like. He looks more natural, more comfortable when he's outside of the pocket making those throws. So continue to find ways, yes, to get him out of the pocket when he make throws, but not in a manner of when, it's, guys are coming at you a million miles per hour. It's got to be designed. I'm not talking about, okay, no one's blocking and he's back there running around like the Mike Vick commercial back in the day, the Mike Vick experience. No, I'm talking about design plays that allow him to get outside the pocket and he knows he's going to have time to make a decision. Pakalak again. Son, it's been 2 years time up. We need RPO or run the gun by the sword. Is the only way now. We have to drop 50 every week to compete in this new era game. I don't know, 50. And I know you're probably being a little sarcastic there, putting 50. Look, I believe it was could be wrong, 2018. But the bottom line is just once. And I know some of it has to do with defense and special teams too, when you have defensive touchdowns or special teams touchdown or wherever whatever it is. But since 2015, South Carolina has averaged over 30 points just once. I believe it was 2018. I could be wrong with that year, but that was something that, USC as a team, I think they were averaging 33 going into Missouri. So I bring that up because the defense and special teams has played a large part. They've played a large part in that. And it's not just defensive touchdowns or special teams touchdowns. It's giving your offense a short field to work with. And some of those short field possessions that they've had have resulted in field goals. I mean, shoot, we saw even off the block kick against Kentucky how it led to a turnover. South Carolina wasn't even able to get 3 points on that drive. So I bring these things up because it's not just averaging, whatever the case may be, 30, 40. It's as cliche as it sounds, it's complementary football, but it's consistency from your offense where you don't need to depend on your defense and special teams to do those things week in and week out. I've said this before. I said this before the Missouri game, that at 5-2, and as much credit as I have given USC this season, and I'll continue to give them credit for being even 5-3 right now, as difficult as last week's offensive performance was, they easily could have been going into the Missouri game at 3-4. They could have lost that game against Georgia State if it wasn't for special teams. 2 block kicks. You have a kicker out there kicking in his first game, place kicking, in Mitch Jeter, and he connects on 2 50-yard field goals. I mean, if that's a gimme, good luck. I guess we won't agree on that. And then you look at, obviously, the Texas A&M game. Special teams, again, helping out with USC. And it's part of the game. It's complementary football. It's not just on the offense. But the point being is the defense and special teams, even though the defense, they were banged up early in the year. They went through their struggles. I know they had a rough start the other night. But as we mentioned before, it's tough to blame them completely when they're being asked to go out on the field, 19 to 11 in minutes in that first half, because the offense couldn't sustain a drive, and they were being thrown back out there over and over. And I mean, you could tell they were gassed. They need to find ways to get better on offense, because if not, you're not just hurting yourself as an offense, but you're hurting the other units. And that was evident the other night with the defense and how many times they had to go back out there on the field. Possibly not the system, just not a good play caller on game day. It could be. Could be the case. Brian, the majority of this team still hasn't beat Missouri, and that's amazing. It really is. The last time that South Carolina has beat Missouri was 2018, 2019, 2019, 2018. I'm losing time here. Let's see. 2018. The Michael Skarnecki monsoon game. Yeah, it is, Brian. That's a game where, and maybe it's just me, when we talk about South Carolina taking, that next step, and we think maybe, okay, they have to do it with Kentucky. They have to do it with Tennessee. They have to do it with Florida. Georgia, of course, that's a given. But those are the teams that you think of. You're not thinking about Vanderbilt. You're not thinking about Missouri. What you're thinking about is you're thinking about what they need to do against those programs. So I say all that because we see this. We see what they do against Missouri, and it makes you scratch your head saying, why do they still struggle to beat this team? Why do they struggle when they're ranked at home? And I think Steven Garcia brought this up the other day. I haven't double-checked it, so, I'll give Steven the benefit of the doubt until I go back and double-check it. But I believe Steven said that this is one of the first times in quite some time that South Carolina lost at home ranked to a team that had under 500 record in conference in quite some time. So I bring that up just because, those things just, they can't happen. Ashley, again, I agree with BMAC Laps. It makes us angry. Good OCs will adjust their scheme based on the strengths of their quarterback and other offensive players. Sat does none of that. M. Colt, look at Tennessee and Arkansas rebuild. It's all culture and a mindset. Culture, mindset. I know I use the word culture sometimes, and I think when we're talking about culture, I think the culture for USC, it has been healthy. It's been healthy this past week. It's been tested, and that's a better way to put it. But there's also a lot of firsts that this team's going through, right? You're first for a lot of the guys that are on this team when I say team. A lot of these guys had never been ranked before. A lot of these guys had never been able to go to Kentucky and win in Kentucky. A lot of these guys, which any Gamecock, had never beat Texas A&M. They're doing things that you need that experience, because when you get into that situation again, your mind tells you, hey, we can do this. Something that I mentioned a lot last week was it felt like last week or 2 weeks ago, I should say, against Texas A&M, when South Carolina slowly started to blow that lead, and A&M started to make their way back. I'm sure there were a lot of people in that building that started thinking, oh boy, here we go again. They're going to blow this game. I don't think that was the mindset on the sideline. I feel like in the past it has, and that's a real feeling that players experience. That's a real feeling players experience. We went through a coaching change my senior year in college. That was an experience that we all had. Anytime that we had a big lead, and it started to creep away. Oh boy, here we go again. And you have to, as a coach, as a coaching staff, you have to break that. You have to break through that. And the only way to do that is to be able to be in those situations and you find ways to win. You find ways to win and you continue to pile those up. Again, another Clemson comparison. I know the old saying right now is it seems like Clemson has that horseshoe, shoved up their ass, right? Anytime they're in a situation where they are in position to lose, they always find a way to win at the end of the game, right? These are the things that we're talking about. South Carolina is trying to overcome that. And if they can overcome these things, that's when great things can happen. T again. O-line looked like they took a step back or two. Yep, talked about that. Ashley, I wish someone would have asked Jaheim today what position does he feel most comfortable playing. I'm curious what he would say. Like that, what position does he feel like? My guess, Ashley, just to try to answer the question, I guess, is that he would say whatever the team needs him to play. That would be my guess. What he would say publicly, behind closed doors, would probably be tight end, receiver, probably that more so that hybrid tight end position. And that's not saying that he's not capable of blocking, but I think he does like getting the ball in his hand. So probably a tight end that's detached from the offensive line would be my guess, because he's a playmaker when he has the ball in his hand. Ashley, I agree that Nate is very good tight end, but it would be cool to see Stogg and Bell out there together at the tight end position. It would be. And again, I'm not saying that Bell's not capable of blocking, and I know I'm a little bit behind on some of these comments. That was at 8:08. So I apologize, Ashley, if you're still listening. But I think it just goes back to what we talked about before, the personnel discussion that we've heard from Beamer, and I'm sure Marcus Satterfield will mention it tomorrow when he speaks with the media, is if that's the issue, can we just get a little bit more of an explanation? Do you like what Stogner and Nate Atkins are doing from a blocking standpoint? Is that what it is? Again, I don't know. And I'm not saying Jaheim's not capable of blocking. I'm just trying to make sense of it based off of what we know, from what we've been told, from the press conference today, from the press conference on Saturday, from the teleconference on Sunday night from Shane Beamer. T. Thompson again. The only thing that helps us with Tennessee is they played Georgia the week before us. Yeah. Okay. And, obviously we don't want to look too far ahead to that game. But at the same time, too, and I do want to double check something on that. You got to take care of business against Vandy. And that game actually, as I look at the schedule right now, that's actually not right, T. They play Missouri the next week, if that's what you're talking about. South Carolina doesn't play Tennessee the week after they play Georgia. They play Missouri, and then you play Florida before you play Tennessee. Ashley, again, what if Sat goes to just being the QB coach and Lumbo calls plays for the last 4 games? I said this before, and I'm not saying it's not important. It's more important. You have a very, 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 very good thing going on with special teams. I would not screw that up at all. I would not screw that up. And like I mentioned earlier, South Carolina has won games because of the way they've performed on special teams. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. That's not saying that offense isn't important, because, again, it clearly is. But don't screw that up. Don't screw that up. You have a good thing going there. Do not screw it up. Going through SC. Scout Guy, I think it is a foregone conclusion that Satterfield is gone after the season. Do you think that Shane goes after an established Power 5 OC, or will he get someone from a smaller program like White? I think the interesting thing about OC hiring, whatever the case may be, whatever position's open, you need to see who's the best fit, right? You need to see who's the best fit. Based off of what we know from this coaching staff, the majority of this coaching staff gets along with each other very, 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 very well. Very well. And they're all bought into what Beamer is looking for them to do from a recruiting standpoint. So that part of it is very important too. Very important. I could sit here and throw names out, but the God's honest truth, these next couple weeks, as we've already seen, whether it be Auburn, right? Whether it be even some of the smaller schools like Charlotte, Nebraska, obviously another Power 5 school. We've seen the dominoes start to fall. That's going to have a ripple effect. There's going to be changes. There could be a situation where a coach leaves a school to take another position, and he might not bring his guys with him. And Beamer might have connections. That's if we get to that point. If they decide to go in a different direction as far as OC or for any position, as far as coaching is concerned. South Carolina Gamecock man says, does NIL have any part in playing time? No. I did bring this up with Garcia, though, in the offseason. That, and I don't think this is the case with any of South Carolina's NIL deals. And again, not that I would know the specifics of anyone's NIL deal, but I threw this out there to Garcia. I said, could you imagine, or I think it was Marcus Lattimore, on our podcast that we do. You imagine if there was an incentive, kind of like with the NFL, we see in pro contracts, an incentive for player X to have X amount of touchdowns in a season, or X amount of receptions, or X amount of yards. That would frustrate me as a player. But again, this is the new era of NIL. And if that's not happening, I'm not saying it's happening here, but if that's not happening in South Carolina, if that's not happening across the country, at least somewhere, I have a feeling it's going to happen. And that's just another hurdle that you're going to have to handle at some point. Let's see. Ashley. I see him coming back too, but that also means there will be. Look, there will be. And again, going back to something that I mentioned a little bit earlier with the quarterback situation, I do feel like we talk about ripple effects with what could happen if a coach gets fired here and this. I think that could be the same thing that happens with South Carolina's quarterback room. That could have an impact because I think there's probably a lot of quarterbacks in that room. There's probably some guys that are getting recruited by South Carolina. And they probably looked at it saying, Rattler's probably going to be a one and done. Well, here we are. If Rattler comes back, again, hate doing some of these hypotheticals, but if Rattler does come back next season, there's a possibility that he's going to have to learn a new playbook anyway, if USC goes in another direction with the OC. If Rattler leaves, he's going to have to learn a new playbook anyway. If Rattler declares for the NFL, he'd have to learn a new playbook anyway. So these are things that I'm bringing up because regardless, it looks like Rattler is going to have to learn a new playbook anyway. And not just Rattler, but all the quarterbacks in that room. Ashley, again, I don't see Doty wanting to sit behind Rattler another year. I think Doty is in a position where if Rattler comes back, he'll have to make some decisions. And that's not saying that he would want to leave, but that's something he'd have to think about. Because last season, coming back from a foot injury, I don't know how many teams, I'm not saying teams didn't want him, but kind of banged up still, right? Now you've had a year underneath you. And again, this is all just speculation. We don't know what's going to happen quite yet. But regardless, this program is certainly better having Doty part of it, regardless of what the capacity is. Just like it's the same when you say with Takarian Joyner. We got no chance against Tennessee. Well, we'll worry about that in a couple weeks. Vandy up first, and then Florida. I'm calling out the offensive line coach. Offensive line coach, he's been back in the building. He hasn't been on the sideline yet in quite some time. Greg Atkins has been dealing with his health issues. So I just want to throw that out there because I think there's some confusion. He's been gone still the last couple of weeks, and hopefully he does get healthy to return to the sideline. I would have thought QB7 would have 5 passing touchdowns in a game, not 5 and 8. Again, with the offense not taking the blame off Rattler, how much do we put it on Rattler? How much do we put it on the OC and the scheme and what they're doing? That's something to ask yourself when you try to figure out these things, Randall. Stop throwing screen passes. The damn defense is in the backfield before the receiver gets the ball. I don't know why they're doing as many screen passes. The only thing I could think of is Rattler just has a quick release, and they're trying to just find ways to get the ball to their playmakers as quick as possible. That's the only thing I could think of. And that's not saying that that's what they should continue to do, but that's the only thing I could think of. Does this loss hurt or help with recruiting? Come again? Does this loss help with recruiting? I don't know how it would help. I think the only way it could help is just how Beamer is handling the scrutiny and some parents, some recruits looking at it and how he's handling the outside noise. So I could have just been a real wise guy and just been like, you kidding me? You're asking how it's going to help? But no, I think if there's anything to try to help, yeah, that would probably be it. Hurt, I've always said this before. Guys that look at one game and that's how they decide if they're going to come to a program or not, you probably don't want them anyway. So I bring that up now. It's, again, just like we need to see from this offense and just like this team, consistency moving forward. You need to see consistency now. You got to see consistency. If they were to lose like this every day, okay, but we'll have to wait and see. Joey, he asks, is it possible that because every play they look to the sideline, that opposing coaches are getting the play signals? I know that schools have individuals that only study that for opposing teams. I don't think that's what it is. Teams are really good with that. And again, going back to when I played football in college, that's been going on for years. And when the higher the level you go up, you're probably even better at it. But I bring that up. I don't think that's the issue. I think there's tendencies that you can see with body language. I mean, I could tell you, I used to study body language when a receiver would come out of the huddle. There could be little things that South Carolina is doing that's giving plays away. You're told as a defensive player, starting with the linebackers, a defensive back, to read through the keys, that triangle. And that triangle is, through where the center is to the quarterback to that running back, wherever he's positioned, left to right. And you're reading through that triangle and you're trying to see if a hat goes up. If a hat goes up, that's pass blocking. If a hat goes down, it's run blocking. Depending on just some of the tendencies that they're doing. So I think it has to be more of a tendency thing than anything. I don't know if they're stealing signals. Because if that's the case, that's happening every single week. I feel like you would change it up. And I'm sure they change it up every week regardless. Kind of like with baseball, right? Pulling on your ear, this, that, doing a couple different things. Let's see. Why not have your best player on the field at all times? No personnel. Well, again, it goes back to what I was talking about before. I know we're over at 2 hours now into the program, a little bit longer edition tonight on this GC Live Talking Tuesday night. But you guys deserve it because we had some technical difficulties with the phone lines tonight. So, and I'm solo tonight. Let's see if I have a voice tomorrow when I'm covering the Patriots. But I think it's real easy to say that, but I mean, this isn't youth football. You gotta be able to identify certain things. You're gonna have to put personnels out there. But with that all being said, you also got to find ways to get your best players on the field. And if it's a personnel issue, like I mentioned before, if it has something to do with what they're trying to do in practice and they feel like, and again, I know we're just talking about Jaheim Bell in this case, but this could be for any position, any player. But if they feel like what they're trying to do, certain players give them the best fit for that, then they're going to go with that. But at some point, especially after what we saw last week, you have to reevaluate that and say, you know what? That didn't work. We have a guy over here, again, Jaheim Bell in this case, that only had 9 snaps on offense last week. We have to find a better way to put him out on the field. And if we do that, and we're not going to be able to do X, Y, Z from a personnel standpoint, what are we going to have to do to tweak it so that we can get Jaheim out there? That's one of the things that these coaches are getting paid a lot of money for, to figure out those questions, especially on the fly, because you don't have extra time this week. It's the middle of the season. You don't have an extra week right now. You have to figure this out in days as you get ready for Vandy. The one and only Georgia is going to beat Texas. Or Tennessee, excuse me. I can't even read. Georgia's going to beat Tennessee. I still think Georgia's defense, I mean, that's going to be a great matchup. It really is. Georgia's offense, or Georgia's defense, excuse me, going up against Tennessee's offense and seeing what happens. And I know, it's easy to make the jokes about Muschamp, but, for the most part, I mean, and it's the defense, regardless if Muschamp was there, they have a very good defense. I think Muschamp is a good defensive coordinator. That's going to be a good matchup. That's going to be the good matchup. Who's the best team in college football? Oy. If it's not Georgia, I'd say Ohio State right now. The only reason why I don't have Tennessee ahead of either of those teams. If it's not, again, maybe you can make a case for Tennessee being in front of Ohio State, but I'd put Georgia at number 1. And the reason being is, instead of Tennessee's defense scares me a little bit. They do. I think we saw that against Alabama. Their secondary, I believe, try to pull this up real quick. I believe from a passing defense standpoint, they are one of the worst in the country. Tennessee's defense, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th worst in the country. They're allowing 300 yards passing a game. Ohio, Vanderbilt, which makes things interesting this week. And we talk about all this running, right? Vanderbilt, Arkansas, which South Carolina knows very well, even though with the loss week 2, and then Oklahoma State. Then you got Tennessee, ranked 127th in the country. That is 5th worst in the country. So that's one of the things that scares me, because you keep scrolling down the list in terms of some of the better teams in the country, right? We're talking about Ohio State, Georgia. Georgia's ranked 13th pass defense. Ohio State, 11th pass defense. Alabama, 32nd. 32nd. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact of what happened when they played Tennessee. So something to keep an eye on. At some point, Sad is going to start sounding like the teacher from Charlie Brown to the offensive players. It is something that you worry about. But again, that falls back on the head coach. He has to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's where conversation and dialogue with not just your offensive players, but just your leaders on the team. That's the stuff that you have to make sure as a head coach that doesn't happen. And if there are concerns, if there are issues internally, and what I mean by that are players feeling possibly that way. If, not saying it is, but if the leaders on the team have to bring that to the coach's attention, it doesn't have to say, all right, player X, Y, Z. You just be like, hey, look, this is something that we need to just address. We're going to do what we can, but you need to be aware of this. That's where this isn't This isn't like a teacher's pet thing. No, like at the end of the day, this is a working environment. I understand this is 18, 19, 20, 22, whatever the case may be, year old kids, but they have to be adults. They have to let their coach know, especially the leaders on the team. That's why you appointed them as leaders. To say, hey, look, we're dealing with this right now. You have to be aware of this. I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations that have gone on. Happens across the country every single day. I'm sure there's been open conversations with Beamer and his players behind closed doors with the leaders of the team coming in. No Mercy says, Sat needs to go. Should have been fired last year. Well, it's not happening right now, No Mercy. So you can show some mercy right now. It's not happening. Beamer came out today. It's not going to happen. And again, unless there is a major letdown against Vanderbilt, the offense just does not show up. I can't see it happening right now. I think if they go in another direction, it's not going to happen until the end of the regular season. That's how these things typically go. So again, if that is the case, which that's the case this weekend, we know that for certain, you need to find a way to fix what we saw the other night so that doesn't happen this weekend. Because if it does, and God forbid USC is to lose to Vandy, and the offense replicates what they did Saturday night, if you thought this past week was bad, if you thought the last 72 hours were crazy, you wait. Hopefully we don't have to find out about that. And that's the insane part of all of this. South Carolina's 5-3. They're one win away from being bowl eligible. They were one win away in the month of freaking October of being bowl eligible before the end of October. And yet, because it's like being in and I think I've used this analogy in the past on Gamecock Central. It's like being in a nice kitchen, right? Got new cabinets, big old sink, nice stove, nice little island in the kitchen. But there's this wretched smell in there. And that's all you can think about. You can't admire the fact that there's a brand new coat of paint. You can't admire that there's a brand new big ass fridge in there. Some new lights, maybe some artwork in there. I don't know. Because all you can think about is that smell. That smell right now is the offense. So even though there are good things going on with this team, even though they have made progressions in with certain parts of this team, even some of it on offense, but because overall that smell in that kitchen is so bad, it's distracting you from appreciating some of that progress that's going on. I think that's where South Carolina is right now. I think that's where they are right now. T, appreciate you tuning in tonight. You get the 2+ hour bonus of GC Live, talking Tuesday nights. Patrick, where does the offense go from here? Again, as we mentioned earlier, you got to go back to what you want to do, right? We mentioned before, I think this is a team that wants to run the football. Vandy is not a good pass defense. Giving up over 300 yards a game. They're not a good pass defense. But at the same time, too, it's not like you're a team that's throwing the ball all over the yard. So I think if you're South Carolina, what you need to do is you got to get back to running the football. We'll see how healthy Lloyd is this Sunday. Vanderbilt is giving up 152 yards a game rushing. That's 82nd in the country. That's towards the back middle half in FBS. So back middle half for rush defense. Not great with pass defense. I could see South Carolina having a huge week offensively. I could see USC having a huge week offensively. There's a lot of noise on the outside. There's a lot of frustration that's going on. I could see South Carolina having a big week offensively. Does that solve all the problems that they have? Certainly not. But I could see them surprising a lot of people this week just because of the matchup that they have against the Commodores and the struggles that Vandy is experiencing from a defensive standpoint. Now, with that being said, Vandy did a nice job against Mizzou a couple weeks ago. Even though they lost, they held them to 17 points. So they are capable of slowing offenses down who are struggling. Because I wouldn't consider Missouri's offense to be a juggernaut by any means. I think we saw that in the second half. They were held to 6 points. And they were fortunate to get things going early. And like we mentioned before, yes, the defense was not one of their better starts. Looked like one of those games at the beginning of the year that they had. But it didn't help that the offense was struggling to stay on the field. And because of that, the defense was very gassed early on. No question about that. Patrick says, what do you make of Beamer's comment about Satterfield, the presser today? I feel like that's what he has to say. I really do. I know there's some people that will disagree with it. I know that there's some people that will want to see or would have liked to see him move on from the OC. That's just not going to happen right now. Not when you're 5-3. Not when you're a game away from being bowl eligible and there's other things that you feel like you need to address. Because by doing that, I feel like it will. I feel like by doing that right now, it sends a message that you're not confident in your ability, or when some type of adversity hits, you're willing to just move on from something. If this team was 3-5, situation's a little different. That's not saying that this team at 5-3, they have no problems. They clearly do. We saw that the other night. But I think it shows that that's how he feels right now. He's going to stick with it. And not just that, but if there is going to be a change, again, unless there's something that crazy that happens this weekend, that he'll address it at the end of the year. Like I mentioned before, Beamer's in the kitchen. Beamer's in that beautiful kitchen. He can smell it too. He can smell that trash in there. He knows it's there. But he also knows that there's a lot of good things going on in that kitchen. That doesn't mean he's getting caught up with the fancy ice maker. Probably going a little too crazy with this analogy now, but he understands that there are some things that he's going to have to address at some point. And if it's not right now, he's going to do it at the end of the season. And if that is the case, based on the things that he said today, and going back to Sunday night during his teleconference, what else would you expect him to say right now? He's not going to throw people under the bus. It's not what a good leader does. So, again, you don't have to agree with what he's doing right now, but if you take a step back and you believe that, okay, if he's going to do this, he's going to wait till the end of the season, okay? Just hear me out. If that's what he's going to do, what would you want him to do? If he's going to do that, you want him to say exactly what he's saying right now. You don't want it to become a distraction. I thought he handled that press conference very well today. Not that any of those questions were really too crazy. I give Ben Portnoy, again, as I've mentioned before, credit for asking the question that I was waiting for someone to ask because I wasn't there, so I can't do that right now. But to ask the personnel question about Bell. And Beamer answered it. Again, sometimes you're not going to get the answer you want, but you have to ask the question. You have to ask the question. And eventually it was asked. Eventually it was. Patrick again. Gaffney checking in. Playoff starts this week. Well, best of luck to Gaffney. Best of luck to all the high school teams. I will say something real quick about high school football in South Carolina. I don't know all the details. I've been following along from afar, which is weird for me to say because I've been so I've been around high school football in South Carolina so much for the last couple of years. It's weird not knowing everything about it, but I heard a lot about the situation at Ridgeview. Regardless, regardless of the rules and all this and that, not saying things aren't important with rules, but the bottom line is, I really hate it for the seniors. I hate it for those seniors, and thinking about those guys, thinking about the seniors at Ridgeview, because some of those guys, they knew nothing, they did nothing wrong, but it's just feeling bad for those guys because this could be for anyone. I can only imagine if I was a senior, some of those guys will never play football ever again. So, again, without knowing all the details, not saying it wasn't the right call, it was the right call, but I think we can all agree that that's just tough. That is just tough for the seniors. So, but best of luck to everyone who is getting ready for the playoffs this week. Twisted Firesat Chicken says, Mike, do we really think recruiters? Mike, do we really think recruiters? I don't know what you mean by that. What's this? Another question. Recruiters don't need to look at one game. They have 21 games. Recruits, I think, is what you're saying. Okay. I think with the recruits, look, last season, and this is obviously, look, I'm not making excuses. I mean, we could see the product out there, but I think some people are going to look at last year and they're going to say, okay, you have a new offensive coordinator trying to figure things out. Okay, whatever. He's going to put his offense in. Sometimes it will click right away. Sometimes it doesn't. They were 7-6 last year. Was the offense a thing of beauty last year? Certainly not. I think more so with this year, people will look at things. But I also think, too, if you like what a head coach is doing and you like what they're doing from a program standpoint, you're going to have confidence in that. Will you lose some recruits at times? Sure. I'm sure you will. But I do think it's a little bit of an overreaction to see some of the comments people are saying, like, oh, Seth's making us lose all these guys. I mean, come on. Stop it. Stop it. Hearing things about the Tennessee, stop it. Again, some of these guys, if that's, they're not, if that's what you believe, that one game and someone's seeing that, they just don't want to come. It's deeper. They wouldn't want to be here to begin with. So, and that's just one of the examples I've seen with the Tennessee kid. Speaking hypothetically, should Beamer make a decision to change the OC? Who do you think would be the top of his? Again, I think we have to wait and see just because there's going to be a ripple effect. There's going to be dominoes that happen. I think we're already seeing that right now with Auburn. So, and again, Nebraska, Charlotte is out there as well. And it's going to change the landscape of things. So I think we have to wait and see how things play out because there could be a guy right now that we're not even thinking of. And he's going to be available. Or there's a guy that we're talking about, but he gets swooped up because this coach is going here for this job. I'm sorry, Mike, but everyone calls our offensive calls. I watched the film guy breakdown of our offense before Georgia, and he even said our offense was ridiculously confusing on what we were trying. The Georgia game, I mean, we're talking about week 3 now. We're talking about week 3. I mean, again, the timing isn't great when I say all this because, I mean, we saw what the offense did the other night, but, I mean, look, that's over what? 2 months ago? A month ago? I'm not going to look at the Georgia game. I mean, I feel like this team has took a lot of steps forward since then. Certainly they have a lot of things that they need to work on, but the Georgia game, but following with what you're saying and applying it to this past weekend, yeah, I mean, there's certain things that they're doing out there that, could come across as confusing. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the confusion part is really there. I think the confusion part going back to last season, I think that was the issue at times, starting with the offensive line. I think there was some confusion issues at the beginning of this season, having a new quarterback learn a new system, having him develop a rapport with not just his receivers and running backs, but the offensive line, knowing what that internal clock would be like, because it's going to be different than Oklahoma, having to step up in the pocket, having to get outside the pocket. When do you get outside the pocket? So I don't think the confusion's there. I think more than anything, it's just they're trying to do things that's just not working. I don't think it's the confusion anymore. Who's your favorite team, NFL and college? I mean, I grew up a Patriots fan when I cover the team. I don't look at it that way. I really don't. I grew up a Notre Dame fan just because there's no college football up here. Or at least people don't really care about Boston College like that. So I was Notre Dame and the Patriots. I don't really follow Notre Dame as much anymore. I probably follow more my college that I played at, Assumption, and then I follow Holy Cross, where one of my head coaches, he's the head coach over there. Number 6 team in the country right now. Big win over Fordham. Trying to go for a 4th straight Patriot League title. And then some of the guys I played with who are coaches across college football, whether it be the FBS level or SCS level. So I don't really have a college football team. More so I follow guys that that I know. I want to see them do well. And then, again, with me, with the Patriots, it's not the same. Growing up, having Brady, and then, it's kind of like when you cover teams, or at least for me, it's kind of like you lose your innocence. Like when you find out, like when the tooth fairy is not real, you lose this sense of innocence, and it's just not the same. So that's how it is for me. I can separate it. I covered the World Series a couple of years ago when Jackie Bradley and Steve Pearce won it for the Red Sox. When I was in those stands, shoot, I covered it the exact same way as I would have covered it, for AC Floor, or whoever, playing Irma, whatever the case may be. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the God's honest truth. That's just how I do it. I just look at it as Team A and Team B. So grew up a Patriots fan, appreciative of everything Bill Belichick brought to New England, all the championships. But when I go to the press conference tomorrow, certainly he's not just another coach. You got to bring your A game when you ask him questions, but it's just another team that you're covering. Patrick, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah, 2.5 hours. Look at us. Intern Joe. We'll have Intern Joe back. Trying to go through all these comments tonight. That's my little present for you guys. R.L. Smith. We just need more love. Luck, offense, vision, and effort. I don't know if you came up with that, RL, but I love it, and I might steal that. Love. Luck, offense, vision, and effort. I like that. SC Scout Guy. Mike, with Coach Atkins' health problems, do you think there's a chance he steps away and we are looking for a new line coach after the season? It's a possibility. With Nate Atkins, I believe he does not have any more eligibility left. And the reason I bring that up, not saying that would be the only reason why Atkins would come back, but, his son was here. That was going to be a tremendous opportunity for him. And I know he downplayed it a little bit, as any coach would, but I know that was something that he was looking forward to. Just being around his children a little bit more, being able to see them. I mean, think about it. It's a tough profession. You're hopping around. You don't get to really see your kids play that much. So to be able to be with his son this year, I know that was very special for him. And he still is, but obviously dealing with everything. So I don't know. I'll say this. Greg Atkins does a tremendous job. I think what needs to be mentioned more than it is that you need to have a good rapport with your offensive coordinator and your offensive line coach. And I'm not saying that it's a bad one, but just the importance that you have with that. So regardless of what happens with Atkins, whether he returns next season, whether he doesn't, because of the health issues, and hopefully that's not the case. I'd love to see Greg back next year because I think he brings a lot to this program. He's had a lot of success at other places as well. You're going to need that relationship to be there. I know a lot of people don't want me to say this, but if Satterfield were to be back next season, if Satterfield's not back next season, that relationship needs to be there. It needs to be there. So there's no question that that is very important. Drew, I'm no football genius. Well, join the club, Drew. I think a lot of people will feel that way in here. I'm just teasing you guys. I'm no football genius, but man, when a team with a similar record blows us up, the play calling is a disgrace. I mean, Mizzou D knew the plays better than Carolina. That was something that was interesting. I can't believe it took us about 2.5 hours into this program that's typically 1 hour to get to. But I want to go back, scrolling through some of the quotes today from Eric Douglas. And I thought this one was very interesting. If I can get this. Find the Eric Douglas quote. But Eric Douglas was one of the players that spoke today. Here's the message, and, again, paraphrasing here. But Eric Douglas, I really don't know what they were looking at, meaning Mizzou's defense, but every time they threw their hands up, they knew we were passing. That was just something interesting. And the other thing, too, was Eric Douglas mentioned that when South Carolina went off script in the first half against Mizzou, the Tigers defense knew that the plays were coming. Eric is a wise person. Eric has been there for, I joke around, 10 years. I mean, he used to be an intern at Watch Fox when I was over there. Probably the biggest intern we ever had. But I thought that was a very interesting comment that he mentioned. So again, goes back to some of the things we were talking about before. That needs to be addressed. Those conversations with the senior leaders on this team, not just with Beamer, but with Satterfield, having those conversations. These are conversations that should be happening every week regardless, but the senior leaders need to take it upon themselves right now to have these conversations. They need to. This is your team, especially when Beamer says that this is a player-led team, and that's the type of culture and program he wants to create. I can sit here and say, and I think we all agree with it, you get paid X amount of dollars, whether it be the head coach, whether it be the offensive coordinator, or any position. It starts with you, no question. But if I'm a player in there, if I'm one of the leaders on the team, I'm taking it upon myself to walk into one of those offices and saying, hey, look, I got to talk with you. And hopefully those conversations are happening in healthy dialogue at that. Looks like we have 2 more comments, and we should wrap things up. JB says, what makes the offensive display more disappointing these last couple of weeks? There's no changes after the bye week. I know you are what you are that far in the season, but goodness, no improvements. Jay, that is something that has surprised me more than anything, is coming off that bye. And I know it was a small sample size, but that was something that I had hammered on before in the past. I saw a lot of my colleagues start to hammer on that coming off of the bye week going against A&M. Just the difference we've seen with South Carolina when they have extra time to prepare. Right? You think back to last season, whether it be the opener, whether you think, what about the game against Florida coming off a bye week after losing to A&M last season? Or playing North Carolina, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, having a couple weeks to get ready for that one. Just the difference we've saw with this team. And I think some of us were hoping to see the same. We expected to see the same against A&M. Didn't happen. And as I've said before, if that kickoff return for a touchdown doesn't happen, I don't know if South Carolina wins that game. And the reason being is the offense didn't do anything to take that next step that would you have liked to have seen coming off a bye week outside of what they did in the second half. Why is that? Why is that? That's That's a fair question. It's a fair question. Drew, thank you for reading my post. No problem, Drew. Appreciate you. Look at the flow, Drew. I'm trying to zoom in at your picture. Look at the flow. Great lettuce. Drew, again, I feel like that Rattler has not learned the playbook. Everyone looks confused. I think I'll say this, Drew. Looks like we're going to wrap things up because I don't see any more comments. Finally got to everybody. It only took me 2.5 hours without intern Joe here. But you know what? We don't miss a beat. We don't miss a beat here. Intern Joe with the night off might take us a little bit longer to get there, but we'll read everyone's messages. That's what we do here at GC Live at Gamecock Central on these talking Tuesday nights. I think the talking about confused, he mentioned that the offense, again, paraphrasing after Saturday night, that they have to do a better job of knowing what they're doing. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. I think they just want to be, and I say they, I'm just thinking as a player here. Don't know this for certain. Trying to connect dots. I think they just want to be able to understand why they're doing things. I mentioned this earlier in the week because, again, as you guys know, with me covering the Patriots, there was a quote that Matt Patricia, former Lions head coach, who's now the senior advisor for the Patriots. He's the offensive coordinator. They haven't given him that title yet. But the reason I bring that up is because he said something the other day. They had coaches available, which is something that's mandatory during the NFL season at some point, and at some point was last week. And I read something that really stood out to me. And it made me think about the situation that South Carolina is currently in. Now, again, this quote can be applied to any offensive situation, not just the Patriots in this case, or as we talk about with South Carolina, the Gamecock situation. I think this can be applied to anywhere. But I thought it was interesting, and I'm trying to pull it up right now because it goes back to a little bit of what we're talking about, Drew, with the confusion. I don't know if I think it's more so, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And I think that's an important part. I think that's a very important part of today's game. And I'm trying to find this. I wasn't expecting to read this one tonight, or else I would have been a little bit more prepared. And as a result, if you guys want to send in an extra question or two, you guys can do that. Continue to scroll on down here because I shared it on Gamecock Central the other day on the message board. We're having conversation about a couple things, and that was one thing that I had brought up. Where he was talking about with young quarterbacks, Mac Jones, of course, SEC ties, but where are we? I think the big thing is, though, as I look for this, what I'm trying to get at with this this quote, and this is the reason I want to read it, is, and here it is, and this is how I worded it on Gamecock Central, so I can kind of set it up. But again, applying it to just play calling in general and where we are in today's society, if you want to say it that way, with coaching. But cover the Pats earlier this week, Matt Patricia, who they won't say by title is the OC, but is the OC, said something interesting that can be applied here about players knowing why they're doing things. Quote, maybe a couple decades ago when we started, we necessarily didn't have to get into all that. This is what we do, and everyone moved forward with it. Education has gotten better and changed. Methods evolved, and I think that's an important key when you put a play in or teach anything. This is why we're doing this. Once you explain that, they get a better picture for it. So again, I share this because Sat, in this case, the offensive coordinator, but this can be applied to any coach, Beamer, Lembo, White with the defense. But Sat's a teacher, just like all these coaches. Sat is a teacher. And if his students are struggling, that falls back on him. Not the full 100%, but a large chunk of it. And I'm sure he'd be the first one to tell you that. So I think that's the issue more than anything, is that they're doing some things, and I wonder if the players fully understand why they're doing it. I know that sounds crazy, but again, going back to that quote by Matt Patricia, if that's happening in the NFL, if NFL coaches are experiencing that now, what's happening at the college level? It can't be alone. It can't just be an NFL issue. Why? Because where do you go to first before you get to the NFL? You go to college. I think there is a connection there with what Patricia's saying and what's taking place here at South Carolina. And I don't think it's just exclusive to USC, but I think that's one of the issues that's holding this team back. They're doing things, but I don't know if these players truly understand why they're doing them. And I'm not saying you got to hold their hand and say, here you go, Johnny. Here's the walkthrough. This is why we're giving them. But explain it to your quarterback. Explain it to some of your players, because, again, going back to that comment by Rattler, and this is just the way that I'm processing it, when he says we just got to do a better job of knowing what we're doing, I think that helps. I think that instead of just saying, this is what we're doing, like Patricia said, it's a different world. You don't even need to be playing football to know that. We all know that for multiple reasons. Some good, some bad. Sometimes it makes things a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, if you're in a position where you are in a leadership role, or in this case, being a teacher, which Satterfield and these coaches are, it falls back on you. It falls back on you. Joey, great talking Tuesday. All we can do is support the team and players. Go Gamecocks. No question. And that's the reason I had Savell Newton on the other day. You know, I had some people reach out. They weren't thrilled by it, by him being on. But I'm a firm believer in giving people an opportunity to talk. We don't have to agree on everything. We can agree to disagree, right? The old saying, we can agree to disagree. I can say some things that maybe some people that are watching tonight or listening, whatever the case may be, wherever you're listening to Gamecock Central, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or on the Gamecock Central podcast, which we upload after these shows each night. Boy, are you going to be in for a doozy. Hopefully you have a long drive tomorrow and you can listen to this whole freaking 3-hour show, because it's about 3 hours. About doing a midday show, for crying out loud here. And the craziest part is we haven't even got to the ads yet. I got to make sure I get to the ads. So that I don't get yelled at, because I'm doing kind of getting carried away here. But Clint Hammond, he's done a tremendous job with helping us out over at Gamecock Central, especially with GC Live. He is one of the main sponsors, one of the big sponsors for GC Live, and I want to make sure that we show that full graphic for Clint Hammond over at Mortgage Network. Something I found out, Mortgage Network, one of their headquarters is here in Danvers, Massachusetts, which is right next to me. So shout out to Clint. Give him a call. He'll be able to help you out, because right now buying a home is just absolutely bananas, and a lot of you out there know that. So give Clint a call. He'll be able to help you out. And today's program is also brought to you by our friends over at Liberty Tax. Overcome taxiety. Tax season, it feels like it's one of those things that will always creep up on you. I had to do some taxes talks today. I might give them a call next time to make it a little bit easier. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. Going back to the comments real quick before we wrap things up. Tonight, Joey, thanks, Mike. Later, Gamecock Nation. We'll be in Nashville this weekend. And Drew says it was mentioned that he's having a hard time with NFL play calling. And look, I think, Drew, if that is the case, and I do my best to go back and listen to every press conference, and so maybe that part of it I missed. If someone else had said that, then I don't know if I would have missed that or I would have seen that regardless, but I'll take your word for it. If that is the case, and you want to be able to help this guy fulfill a dream, which is he wants to play in the NFL, you got to figure out, and it says others. Okay, I got you. Appreciate that. If he wants to be able to fulfill an NFL dream, you got to find ways to be able to improve that. So I don't know what the disconnect is. I don't know what the disconnect is, but certainly there are issues with the offense as a whole, with the scheme. And I think the big thing too is, and we see, and again, another NFL comparison, we see this so much with the NFL. You know, how many times, look at the Jets. I don't know if we have any Jets fans in here. I promise I'm not just bringing this up because the Pats played this past weekend, but how many times do we see the Jets have a high draft pick and they get a quarterback, really good guy coming out of college, and he goes out there and what happens? Nothing. Just plays like crap, just pisses down his leg. I say that because it's so important for these quarterbacks to be surrounded by a offensive coordinator that can help work with, and they have a good working relationship. And I'm not saying that the working relationship with Satterfield and Rattler is poor, but every part of it has to be there, especially when you have a guy coming in and he's trying to learn a new system right away. It's going to make things challenging, especially when you have the gauntlet of a schedule as they had early on in the year. So I think it's just so important to be able to have a system that guys can easily pick up on. And as a coach, as a teacher, you can identify some of the hurdles that they're going to have to face, some of the challenges. And I'm not saying that Sat isn't capable of doing that. But again, if this is the case, and I'm not saying it is, but if this is the case, because there's certainly some type of hurdles, they're going to have to find a way to be able to get over that. And then, R.L. Smith, Yuva, when you gave the example of the quarterback going to the Jets and struggling, well, that is why Geno Smith is such a great story this season. Yeah, sometimes that's the case. And I feel like we see this with quarterbacks more than any other position in sports, that sometimes they're just not in the right situation. And that's why I keep using the analogy of a relationship where you could be dating someone, they could be bringing a lot to the table, but at some point you realize, you know what? It's not working. It's not working. That's where I feel like South Carolina is right now. It's the elephant in the room. They're going to try to work through some things right now, but I don't know if it's what's best moving forward after the regular season. We'll have to wait until we get to that point, but I appreciate that, Drew. Got to play much faster to keep opponents on their toes. No question about it. And going back to two of these, SC Scout Guy. Today I learned that Yuva is an Italian surname. Had no idea. That's right. Just like in Spanish, in Italian, Yuva, or as we say in Italy, uva, it means grape in Italian. Just like in Spanish. We were from Casino, Italy. Half Irish, half Italian. RL. I've been thinking about Beamer's vid, taking players to the top of Willie B, and talked why fans are so invested in events on the field, have to survive weeks like this. Yeah, and look, again, the players get it. I think a majority of the players truly get it. I've had conversations. I've said this before. I talked with Dante Reno at Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago when we ran into each other. He was there with one of his college teammates, or high school teammates, who's going to play football at Alabama. And he knew one of the coaches on staff for the Bears. So Dante and I caught up. Dante's been on some of our Gamecock Central shows. He's been on this program right here, GC Live Talking Tuesday nights a couple weeks ago. We also had Pup Howard on. And we talked about how for some, when they see some of those messages, whether it be the fan base, whether it be whoever, and they're not happy about something, and obviously right now is an ideal situation, how some get concerned about what messages that paint or portray to the recruits. And I was talking to Reno about that. And again, if you tune in to GC Live Talking Tuesday nights, you already know this, and Pup Howard. And they kind of just laughed it off. They're like, all it shows more than anything is that they're passionate. It shouldn't scare us. Savell Newton even mentioned that. He's like, yeah, we see it. It actually motivates us to want to get there and prove them wrong and be able to change things. So again, I've said this before. If a recruit's seeing something like that on social media by, Tommy 42328, taking a shot at the program, if he doesn't want to come because of what that's being said on Twitter, probably was not the best fit for the program anyway. Probably don't want them anyway. So I just bring that up. I know Reno, I know Pup don't speak for every recruit out there, but if someone is more concerned about what is being said on Twitter than what actually is being said and done in the building, probably don't want them part of the program to begin with. Whew, boy, went through almost this whole water. That's how you know we got after it tonight. I still have a little bit more water left. Talking. Gonna have no voice tomorrow. Intern Joe not with us tonight. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. If you missed any of this program, if you want to go back, listen to the beginning. I know we repeated ourselves a couple times as we try to answer some of the questions tonight. Go back. YouTube will have it. We'll also have it on Gamecock Central's podcast platform. You can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcast. And we'll continue. Red water must have a mix in it. Yes, we do. I usually don't give no free ads, but I love this stuff. A couple squirts in there. Trying to stay away from the sugar. This has no sugar. This is the caffeine. Big fan of the black cherry. Big fan. This is my go-to stuff, though. Trying to get those electrolytes in me. But, and I appreciate it, Frederick. Appreciate all you guys tuning in tonight. Again, this was not planned that we were going to do a 3-hour show tonight. But next week definitely won't be. Girlfriend's visiting on a Tuesday night. So she's coming up from South Carolina. She probably doesn't want me to do a 3-hour show. So, we'll do an hour next week. Maybe a little longer. Won't tell her. But I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. You guys have a good week. Enjoy the game on Saturday. If you're going out to Nashville, check out, I think it's called Never Never. I think that is the bar that Patrick Davis has. So definitely go check that out. We need to get Shane Beamer on one of these Tuesday night shows. I'll say this. Obviously, again, not to beat a dead horse with me, being up here, one of the Patriot stuff. We'll have to wait and see what the plans will be after this football season. But there's a lot of good things going on at Gamecock Central, and we'll continue to grow. And I'm very excited for those guys, as well as being back down there soon. So appreciate you guys. Have a good week. And again, if you're going out to Nashville, safe travels and enjoy the game on Saturday night.